Welcome, everyone. This is your friend, the DN What If, here with another exciting fanfiction. Today, we're diving into the story of what if Deku used his biology skills to survive the infection? If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more fanfiction content just like this. Now, let's get started with the fanfic. Izuku Midoriya always found something comforting in campus noise. The buzz of bicycles. The shuffle of boots on wet concrete. Even the distant thud of a dorm party echoing through paper-thin walls. There was a rhythm to it all, something predictable safe. That morning it was too quiet. He sat cross-legged on his dorm bed, blinking at the glow of his laptop screen. Half-written notes on fungal infections sat idle while his fingers hovered over the keys, distracted. News articles had begun cropping up with alarming frequency headlines in red fonts, hospital photos with faces blurred out, strange CDC advisories that vanished a few hours after posting. Tokyo hospital evacuated after violent incident. Breaking, new drag Micazine under review following complications. Officials urge calm amid online speculation. He tapped the trackpad, scrolling through a cached version of one of the deleted advisories. Its sterile language did little to soothe his unease. Monitor for unusual behavioral changes. Report any instances of unexplained aggression, heightened motor skills, or... He stopped, his breath catching in his throat. "Kaken, you see this?" A grunt answered from across the room. Katsuki Bakugu sat on his desk chair, shirtless, headphones crooked around his neck as he mashed buttons on a game controller like it owed him money. "See what?" he muttered, eyes glued to the screen, thumbs flying across the controller. "If it's another Reddit panic post, skip it. They're always wrong." Izuku hesitated. He usually kept his worries to himself, especially around Katsuki, whose default setting was cynical dismissal. But this felt different, heavier. It's not Reddit. It's real news. Multiple hospitals shut down in the last 48 hours. Something's going on with Micazine. Katsuki scoffed, never taking his eyes off the screen. They recalled that crap months ago. People are just bored and freaking out. It's flu season. Everyone loses their mind over some cough and a nosebleed. He punctuated his statement with a victorious shout as his character delivered a brutal finishing move. But Izuku kept staring at the screen. He clicked through to another article, then another. He focused on the images, the ones that hadn't been scrubbed clean. In one photo, a nurse's arm was blurred poorly. You could still see her skin, blackened and cracked like overcooked meat. And her eyes wide open, staring. He shuddered. This wasn't a flu. "Kaken, listen please," he pleaded, his voice tight. "This is serious. People are getting sick, something more than just the flu. And they're acting violently." The advisory mentioned. He trailed off, the implications too horrifying to say aloud. Katsuki finally paused his game, letting out a frustrated huff. "What? Acting violently? So what? People are always acting violently. Look at the comments section on any news article. What's your point, Deku?" Izuku swallowed, forcing himself to meet Katsuki's gaze. The advisory said to monitor for unexplained aggression and heightened motor skills. You were taking Micazine, remember? For your rage issues? Katsuki's face hardened. He hated talking about that, about the therapy he'd reluctantly attended, the medication he'd just as reluctantly taken. Micazine was supposed to help him control his anger, to smooth out the jagged edges of his personality. "Yes, so? I stopped taking it months ago, after the recall." "What are you implying, Deku?" His voice was low, a dangerous rumble. Izuku held up his hands, palms open in a gesture of peace. "I'm not implying anything. I'm just concerned. Maybe the effects linger. Maybe it's not over." He clicked on another article, his finger pointing to a blurb about a police officer attacking bystanders with superhuman strength. "Just be careful, okay?" Katsuki studied him for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Izuku could never quite decipher what was going on behind those intense, red eyes. Finally, Katsuki let out a sigh, the tension seeming to ease from his shoulders. "Fine, Deku, he said, picking up his controller again. I'm fine. You worry too much. Go back to studying, okay? I have a tournament to win. Down the hall, someone screamed. It wasn't the usual drunken revelry from a Friday night. This was raw, terrified, a sound that clawed at the inside of Izuku's throat and made the hairs rise on his arms. Katsuki was on his feet in a second, controller clattering to the floor. That sounded like it came from Grape's floor. His voice was tight, his usual swagger replaced with a taut alertness. Izuku stood slower, his heart hammering against his ribs. You think it's just another fight? Dorm brawls were common, fueled by cheap beer and TSing. But the scream. Katsuki was already at the door, yanking it open. Only one way to find out. He stalked into the hallway, a predator sensing prey. Izuku hesitated, glancing back at his laptop. Another alert had popped up. A grainy livestream. A girl in blood-slick scrubs, whispering frantically into the camera, her voice drowned out by heavy, wet thuds behind her. Stay away, they're everywhere, don't, oh God. The video abruptly cut out. Izuku's breath hitched. He knew he should study, should bury himself in the textbook and ignore the scream, the video, the sense of impending doom that had settled over the dorm. But he couldn't. He knew he had to follow Katsuki. He scrambled up, grabbing his backpack, throwing in a water bottle and a granola bar. He caught up with Katsuki at the stairwell. The air was thick with a metallic tang, and the screams were more frequent, more desperate. Kaken, Izuku started, his voice trembling. Did you see Dash? Katsuki cut him off with a sharp gesture. Stay close, Death. And don't do anything stupid. They crept down the stairs, each step creaking under their weight. The closer they got to Minetta's floor, the louder the sounds became. Groans, punctuated by sickening crunches and frantic, terrified pleas. Peeking around the corner, Izuku recoiled. The hallway was a scene of carnage. Bodies lay sprawled on the floor, limbs twisted at unnatural angles. A figure in a ripped hoodie, face smeared with blood, was hunched over a student, tearing at his flesh with savage ferocity. What the hell? Katsuki breathed, his face pale under the dim fluorescent lights. The figure looked up, its eyes vacant, bloodshot. It let out a guttural snarl and lurched towards them, its movements jerky and unnatural. Izuku stumbled back, his brain struggling to process what he was seeing. Zombies? This couldn't be. This was a movie, a nightmare, not his college dorm. Katsuki, however, reacted instantly. He grabbed a fire extinguisher from the wall and charged towards the creature, swinging the heavy cylinder with a roar. Get behind me, Deku, he yelled. The extinguisher connected with a sickening thud, sending the creature sprawling. It didn't stay down. It clawed its way back to its feet, its eyes fixed on them with a horrifying hunger. This wasn't a fight. This was survival. And as Izuku watched Katsuki, his hot-headed, emotionally stunted roommate, bravely facing down a real-life zombie, he knew their lives had just changed forever. His organic chemistry textbook suddenly seemed incredibly, devastatingly irrelevant. Blood sprayed against the cinder block wall. Izuku flinched, the coppery scent thick in his throat. The thing, whatever it was, staggered again, but didn't fall. Not until Katsuki raised the extinguisher a second time and brought it down with a sickening crack that echoed down the corridor. This time, it stayed down. Katsuki stood over the corpse, chest heaving. His hands trembled around the metal canister, knuckles white. You saw that, right? He asked without turning around. Tell me I'm not losing it. Izuku couldn't answer. His mouth was dry, words caught somewhere behind a scream. Behind them, a door creaked open. A girl stepped out barefoot, soaked in blood, clutching a lacrosse stick like it was the only thing anchoring her to the world. You have to get out, she whispered, her voice ragged with fear. They're all turning. Some of them don't even need to be bitten. What do you mean? Izuku asked, inching closer despite the way his legs felt like wet paper. What's happening? The girl blinked at him like she wasn't quite sure he was real. Then her gaze dropped to Katsuki's arm, lingering on the crimson stain blooming on his bicep. He followed it and saw the gash. Shallow but bleeding. That wasn't from? Izuku asked, voice tight. No, Katsuki said quickly, already tying a strip of random fabric around it with jerky movements. From when I busted the cabinet open this morning. Don't start. His voice was laced with a defensive anger that Izuku knew all too well. Katsuki was a master at deflecting vulnerability with aggression. Right? Izuku muttered. Okay. He wanted to believe him, desperately, but the girl's haunted eyes screamed otherwise. The girl shook her head. You shouldn't stay here. The RA barricaded the main lobby, but the lower floors are gone. Someone tried to call the cops, but they're not coming. Another distant scream cut through the air, high and fast, ending in a sickening gurgle, a sound that sent a fresh wave of icy dread washing over Izuku. Katsuki grabbed Izuku's arm, his grip surprisingly gentle. We need to go. Now. Despite his gruff exterior, even Katsuki couldn't mask the fear that flickered in his eyes. Wait, Izuku said, his academic mind desperately trying to claw back some semblance of control. He needed a plan, even a flawed one. We need supplies. My phone, your keys, jackets, food if we can carry it. Katsuki hesitated for half a second, his gaze flicking between the girl, the gash on his arm, and the hallway beyond. Then he nodded. We gear up. Fast. His voice was low, urgent, devoid of its usual bluster. Where's your room? The girl asked, her voice barely audible. 4th floor, Izuku said. Elevator's dead. We take the stairs. He swallowed hard, picturing the long, winding climb, picturing what, or who, they might encounter on the way. He glanced at Katsuki, who was already halfway down the hallway, his face a mask of grim determination. He knew Katsuki. He knew that beneath the anger and the bravado, there was a fierce protectiveness, a loyalty that ran deep. He might not know how to express it, but Izuku knew he wouldn't be abandoned. Turning to the girl, whose name he didn't even know, Izuku offered a shaky smile. We're going to get through this. He wasn't sure if he believed it himself, but he had to say it. He had to believe something. He took a deep breath and followed Katsuki, the girl trailing behind, the lacrosse stick held ready. The familiar, mundane hallway of their dormitory had become a gauntlet, a path into the terrifying unknown. Their survival, Izuku knew, depended on their ability to work together, to trust each other, and to fight. The air in the dorm room hung heavy, thick with a silence Izuku had never experienced before. It was a silence that screamed louder than any scream, a stark contrast to the chaos erupting outside. He looked around their shared space, at the posters haphazardly plastered on the walls, the overflowing laundry basket, the remnants of their ordinary, unremarkable lives. Just hours ago, this room was a haven, a place of late-night study sessions and whispered secrets. Now, it felt like a museum exhibit, a relic of a world that no longer existed. Katsuki, ever the pragmatist, moved with a grim efficiency. He grabbed a faded black t-shirt from the mountain on his bed, pulling it over his head, muscles flexing beneath the worn fabric. Then, with a harsh yank, he opened his desk drawer, rummaging for his keys and the glint of steel, a switchblade he probably shouldn't have. Katsuki never talked about where he got it, and Izuku had never asked. Now, it felt like a necessary evil. Izuku felt a tremor run through him as he shouldered his backpack, the straps digging into his skin. He rummaged through his meager supplies, cramming in more granola bars, a precious bottle of water, a heavy-duty flashlight, and his phone charger, a desperate hope for connection in a disconnected world. He paused, his hand hovering over the first aid kit in the bathroom. It felt pathetic, a tiny shield against the onslaught he knew was coming. Still, he grabbed it, adding it to the growing weight in his pack. Then, almost as an afterthought, he picked up the old baseball bat they'd used during the dorm Olympics last semester, a relic of a simpler time. Last night, he would have felt ridiculous wielding it. Now if Katsuki, now covered head to toe in black, a hoodie, zipped up the front with one forceful motion. He tossed a screwdriver and his phone into his pocket, his expression unreadable. You good? He asked, his voice a low growl that barely registered as concern. I think so, Izuku replied, his voice barely a whisper. He wasn't good. He was terrified. But he knew he had to project some semblance of strength, For Katsuki, for himself, for the girl standing nervously by the door. The girl, a petite brunette he vaguely recognized from his history class, clutched a lacrosse stick like a lifeline. Her knuckles were white, her eyes darting nervously between Izuku and Katsuki. "We need to move. Now," she urged, her voice tight with fear. As they filed out into the hallway, Izuku stole one last glance back at the room. His textbooks lay open on his desk, notes still scattered around them, a half-finished bag of chips sat forlornly on the shelf. It felt like looking at someone else's life, a life that had been abruptly severed. The hallway was eerily quiet, the usual afternoon chatter replaced by an oppressive stillness. Sunlight streamed through the windows at the end of the hall, painting long, distorted shadows on the floor. It was a beautiful day, Izuku thought absently, a beautiful day for the world to end. Their dorm room was on the 4th floor. That meant 4 flights of stairs, for potential encounters with the things that were out there. For flights of unknown terrors. He took a deep breath, trying to calm the frantic beating of his heart. Katsuki moved forward, his presence a wall of unwavering determination. The girl, her lacrosse stick held at the ready, fell in behind him, her every move tense and wary. As they reached the stairwell, the scent of rot hit them hard, thick and wet, like mold and blood and something worse. Izuku gagged and pulled his hoodie over his nose. The air hung heavy, saturated with the stench of decay. Katsuki didn't react. He just gripped the fire extinguisher tighter and kept going, his boots thudding on the concrete stairs. Their footsteps echoed, each creak of the stairs louder than it had any right to be. Izuku listened, his ears straining for any other sound, the shuffling, miming noises that had been echoing down the halls not long ago. The girl behind them finally spoke, her voice softer now. "I'm Ochako. Ochako Uraraka. I'm 19, poli-sci major. I think." She let out a nervous chuckle, like even saying that felt absurd now. Everything felt absurd now. Political science degrees felt as useful as sand castles in a tsunami. Izuku glanced back at her. Her face was pale, illuminated by the dim emergency lights that flickered overhead. "I'm Izuku. Midoriya. Bio major." He hesitated. "3rd year, but I'm technically a sophomore. I had to take time off after, well, it's not important." "Nice to meet you, Izuku. Not technically a sophomore?" Ochako said with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. The smile was a brave attempt at normalcy, a fragile shield against the horror that surrounded them. Katsuki let out a dry snort from up front. "Katsuki Bakugu. 21. Criminal psych." He didn't look back. "I guess I'm the muscle now." "You were already the muscle," Izuku said quietly. "You just weren't always useful." He winced, regretting the words as soon as they left his mouth. Now wasn't the time for petty arguments. Tension was already high enough. Katsuki stopped abruptly, turning his head slightly, his eyes narrowed. Izuku braced himself for the explosion he knew was coming. Instead, Katsuki just sighed. "Whatever, that. We'll settle this after we're done not getting eaten." He resumed his descent. They descended another flight. The 3rd floor landing was smeared with something dark blood, probably, though Izuku didn't want to look too closely. A cell phone lay abandoned near the wall, its cracked screen flickering with ghostlight. A shoe sat in the middle of the hall. Just one. The screams had stopped a while ago, replaced by a guttural miming that echoed through the building, a constant, stomach-churning reminder. Izuku felt a chill crawl down his spine. The small, everyday object, out of place and alone, was a stark reminder of the sudden, terrifying disruption of normalcy. "Do you think anyone's left in the building?" Ochako asked. "No one's sane," Katsuki muttered. Izuku paused, listening to the muffled chaos filtering in from outside, the occasional distant scream, the pop of something like gunfire, the wail of sirens already starting to blur together into a single, hopeless howl. Ochako gripped her stick tighter. "I was supposed to work a shift tonight. At the campus cafe. I took it from another girl. She needed to study, and I needed the $10. Izuku offered a weak smile. $10 won't buy much now." "No," she said quietly. "But it used to buy groceries." They descended in silence after that, each lost in their own thoughts. As they rounded the last stairwell onto the first floor, Katsuki held up a hand to stop them. He crouched low, peering through the narrow window set into the door. His jaw tensed. "Two of them," he whispered. "Near the vending machines. Tearing something apart. Might have been a person. Might still be." Izuku moved beside Katsuki, peering through the glass. He could just make out the shapes, two figures crouched low in the flickering fluorescent light, hunched over what used to be a student. Flesh tore like wet paper. Blood sprayed against the vending machine glass. He swallowed hard and whispered, "We don't know what these things even are." Katsuki shot him a glance. "Zombies?" "No," Izuku shook his head. "No, not really. They mimic zombies, but we haven't studied them. No one's had the chance. We don't know if they can see, or smell, or hear. We don't know if they hunt by movement, or scent, or if they're just angry." Ochako edged closer, her voice tense. "We know they're strong. That they don't die easy." "Yeah," Izuku murmured. "They attack anyone who still seems normal. They've got unhuman strength. They survive things that should kill them. But other than that, we're blind. We don't even know what triggers them. Sound? Blood? Fear?" Katsuki turned back to the window, jaw clenched. "We know one thing. They'll come for us if we get too close." Izuku nodded, forcing down the fear twisting in his gut. "Then we stay quiet, move fast, and pray to whatever's left that they don't notice us." Ochako gripped her lacrosse stick tighter. "I'm not much for prayer, but I'll take a little luck." Katsuki grinned, teeth clenched. "You've got me. That's better than luck." Izuku snorted quietly. "I'm not sure those two things are different." He pushed himself away from the door, his mind already racing, analyzing, trying to find some sliver of logic in the insane situation. Then Katsuki reached for the handle, and the door creaked open. They slipped through like shadows, slow, careful steps, the sound of tearing flesh still masking their movement. The sickly sweet smell of decay permeated the air, a stark contrast to the stale pizza scent that usually clung to the hallway. The things at the vending machines didn't turn. Not yet. Izuku could hear the wet slurping, the awful crunch of bone between teeth. For a breathless moment, it worked. One step, two. Then Ochako's foot hit something. A dropped clack. Clack, clack, clack. It rolled across the tile like a shot. Both creatures froze. Their heads snapped up at the exact same time. Eyes wide. Mouths smeared with blood. And then screaming. Not human screaming. Their throats tore open with the sound, like metal dragged down pavement. "Run!" Katsuki barked. Too late. One lunged inhumanly fast and grabbed Ochako by the arm. She shrieked, twisting, but it yanked her off balance, dragging her to the floor. The other creature charged Izuku. He barely had time to swing. The baseball bat connected with a wet crack, sending the thing stumbling sideways but not down. It slammed into the wall and came right back at him, face twisted with animal fury. "Ochako!" Izuku screamed. Katsuki was already moving. He threw himself onto the one pinning her, driving his switchblade deep into its neck. It didn't even flinch. "Kaken!" Izuku shouted. "I know!" Katsuki growled, yanking the blade free and stabbing again, this time under the jaw, into the skull. The creature spasmed, then dropped like a puppet with its strings cut. Izuku, his knuckles white around the baseball bat, focused on his own attacker. He swung again, harder this time, connecting with the creature's temple. It staggered, momentarily stunned. He didn't hesitate. He swung again and again, fueled by a desperate surge of adrenaline, until the thing finally collapsed. For a moment, no one moved. Their breath came in ragged gasps. Blood smeared the floor. The vending machines buzzed with eerie calm. Izuku pushed himself up, voice shaking. "We can't do that again." Ochako nodded, pale but steady. "I'm okay. I think." Katsuki stood over the body, panting. "Next time, no mercy. We see one, we kill it. Fast." Izuku looked down at the twitching corpse, then up at the wide exit doors. "We need to get out of this building," he said. "Because next time, there might be more than two." And outside, something howled in the distance. Not human. Not anymore. The dorm doors slammed shut behind them with a heavy clang, like the world itself was sealing off everything they used to know. Outside, the chaos was immediate. The quad, once full of students biking to class or sunbathing between lectures, was a war zone. Smoke curled from a burning trash can. A line of flipped scooters lay like bodies in the grass. Somewhere across campus, a car alarm shrieked, unrelenting, as if trying to outscream the people running beneath it. Izuku froze. Just for a second. Long enough to take it in. A girl sprinted across the courtyard, barefoot and bleeding, only to be tackled mid-run by a figure that moved too fast, too jerky. She didn't scream long. "Deku, move!" Katsuki barked, shoving him forward. They ran. Izuku, usually more comfortable with a textbook than a sprint, stumbled slightly, his breath catching in his throat. Katsuki was a human battering ram, his broad shoulders leading the way. Trailing behind them, face pale but determined, was Ochako. She clutched her lacrosse stick like a lifeline, staying close to Izuku. "Where's your car?" she gasped. "North lot," Katsuki grunted. "Other side of the dining hall." "Stay low." The things, weren't everywhere, but they were clustered like vultures over a kill, their groans a horrifying chorus that seemed to vibrate through the very ground. One lurched out from behind a toppled recycling bin, its face a gruesome mask of decay, and Katsuki reacted without hesitation. He grabbed a fallen bicycle frame and swung it like a medieval flail, connecting with a sickening crunch. "Keep moving!" he yelled, his voice tight with a controlled fury Izuku had only glimpsed during intense video game sessions. Katsuki wasn't scared, Izuku realized. He was just focused. They weaved through the panicked crowd. Some people ran without direction, others stood frozen, glued to their phones. A campus police car tore past, lights flashing, and crashed seconds later into a retaining wall. No one inside got out. Izuku's phone buzzed wildly in his pocket, emergency alerts stacking like dominoes. He pulled it out, thumbing through glitching screens as they ran. Emergency broadcast system: all non-essential personnel advised to shelter in place, avoid crowded areas. Lock and barricade doors. Signal interrupted. A low emergency tone bleated in his ears, followed by a pre-recorded voice looping brokenly. "That this is not a drill. Biological risk. Seek shelter." Izuku switched apps. Twitter X was useless, flooded with screaming, blurry videos, cities on fire. Discord server links. "Don't go to the stadium. It's a slaughterhouse." He showed the message to Katsuki, who grunted in acknowledgement, knocking back another shambling figure with the bike frame. "Stadium's the obvious place. Everyone'll flock there, thinking it's safe. It's a trap." Ochako peered over Izuku's shoulder between breaths. "Is there anywhere safe?" Her eyes were wide and haunted, mirroring the terror that gripped Izuku. "I don't know," Izuku said, his voice barely a whisper above the groans and shuffling of the things. "The alerts are conflicting. Half say stay inside, half say evacuate. Someone mentioned shelters set up at Roosevelt Library and the West Loop Medical Campus, but a scream cut him off, this one impossibly close. Izuku's heart leaped into his throat. Behind them, two figures bolted from the dining hall doors, clothes soaked in blood, faces contorted in unimaginable fear. A third came lurching after, mouth open wide, black rot already creeping up its jaw. It screamed, a guttural, horrifying sound that sent a shiver down Izuku's spine. The creature's shriek split the air like glass, and across the quad, others turned. Their vacant eyes, once filled with the spark of a student's life, now burned with a hunger that made Izuku want to vomit. "Go!" Katsuki shouted, his voice raw. They heard that. They sprinted harder now, down the path that curved past the student rec center. Izuku's chest burned. The early morning walk he usually took to clear his head before classes was now a desperate flight for survival. He clutched his phone tighter, still scanning, still hoping for a message, a map, something that would tell him what to do, where to go. He wasn't built for this. He was Izuku. Midoriya, the guy who aced pre-med bio, the guy who volunteered at the campus soup kitchen, the guy who tripped over his own feet when he talked to girls. He wasn't a survivor. He wasn't Katsuki. The rec center loomed ahead, its windows shattered, glass glittering on the walkway like ice. Someone had spray-painted a giant red X across the wall in dripping strokes. Izuku didn't stop to think about what it meant. He just kept running, his lungs screaming, the weight of his backpack a lead anchor. They cut through the plaza, boots slapping pavement, each footfall a desperate plea for escape. "I see the lot," Katsuki yelled, pointing past the tennis courts. A line of cars shimmered in the heat haze beyond the fence, still untouched. For now. Hope, fragile as spun glass, flickered in Izuku's chest. He risked a glance behind them. For no 5 of them, trailing close now. Bodies that should have fallen apart by now, blood-caked, eyes vacant, some missing chunks of flesh. One of them still wore a resident assistant vest, mouth hanging open in a silent M. His leg bent the wrong way. He didn't seem to notice. They weren't running like humans. They didn't pace or breathe. They just moved with that twitchy, animal violence Izuku couldn't stop replaying in his mind. "They're getting closer," Ochako shouted, clutching her side as she ran. Her ponytail whipped behind her, a frantic flag of surrender. "They don't stop, why don't they stop?" Izuku knew. He'd stayed up too late reading obscure medical journals, fueled by lukewarm coffee and a need to understand. He knew more about viruses than he cared to admit. "They don't feel pain," Izuku gasped, ducking under a low tree branch. "They're not burning energy like we are, they just save it for the car." Katsuki snapped, his voice sharp and laced with a fear he wouldn't admit. He was leading the way as usual, his broad shoulders hunched, his fists clenched. Katsuki was always the one in charge, the one who barked orders, the one who pretended he wasn't terrified. Izuku knew better. He saw the tremor in Katsuki's hands, the frantic glint in his eyes. They rounded the final corner into the parking lot. Empty cars stretched before them, angled like tombstones under the sickly green glow of the setting sun. He could see Katsuki's beat-up black Nissan at the far end, tucked between a white sedan and a food DLVRY scooter. A wave of relief washed over him, quickly followed by a fresh surge of terror. Movement. Ochako froze beside him, her hand instinctively tightening around her lacrosse stick. "Is he one of?" Ochako began, her voice a trembling whisper. The man looked up. His eyes were wide, desperate. "Human. Don't go that way," he shouted, pointing past them, towards where they'd emerged from. "They're circling from the dining hall too." "You're..." A blur of movement. Something tackled him from behind, biting deep into his neck. He hit the pavement hard, and the screaming started again, sharp and agonizing, cut short too quickly. No one looked back after that. The image was burned into Izuku's brain. Wide, pleading eyes that turned vacant in seconds. They hit the rows of cars at full speed, dodging mirrors, sliding on loose gravel. Izuku's heart hammered against his ribs, a frantic drumbeat against the rising tide of panic. He stumbled, nearly fell, but he couldn't stop, couldn't breathe until he reached the relative safety of the car. "There!" Katsuki shouted, fumbling his keys from his hoodie pocket as they reached the car. His usual bravado seemed brittle, a thin veneer over the fear that gnawed at him. "Get in, get in, get in." Izuku yanked the back door handle. "But, Kaken!" Izuku yelled, his voice cracking. He glanced over his shoulder, seeing a shuffling figure emerge from between 2 cars, its movements jerky, unnatural. "I know." He stabbed the fob. The lights blinked. Ochako threw the rear door open and dove in first, collapsing sideways across the seat, gasping for air. Izuku followed a half-second later, just as something slammed into the window. The impact rattled the car. A blood-slicked face. Skin peeling from its cheeks. Cracks ran down the glass. Katsuki opened his door, kicked it outward to knock the thing back, and threw himself behind the wheel. The infected body slammed against the hood, clawing, snarling. Katsuki roared as he turned the ignition. The engine stuttered. Twice. Come on, move." Katsuki slammed the dash. The engine coughed and caught. With a screech of tires, the car lurched backward. The creature slid off the hood, thudding to the pavement in a twitching heap. Another one darted toward them from the left. Katsuki swerved around it with inches to spare. They hit the street at 40 miles an hour. The echoes of screaming and of something worse faded behind them. Inside the car, no one spoke for a long time. Izuku stared down at the tremble in his hands, still clutching his phone like it was the only thing holding him together. He didn't know where they were going. He just knew they couldn't go back. He glanced back at Ochako. She was curled up, silent. He looked at Katsuki, his knuckles white as he gripped the steering wheel, his jaw tight. He'd never seen Katsuki like this. Beneath the anger, Izuku saw fear, raw and vulnerable. They sped through the edge of campus, tires screeching over pavement cracked from heat and neglect. The farther they got from the dorms, the worse it became. The world was unraveling street by street. Cars jammed the main intersection just past the student bookstore, horns blaring uselessly. A sedan slammed into a pole as someone fled from it mid-drive, arms flailing, their shirts soaked in blood. Pedestrians pounded on windshields, begging to be let in, but no one did. Izuku shuddered, pressing his lips together. He'd seen things in the last few hours that would forever stain his memory. A woman in scrubs threw herself in front of a city bus, trying to stop it only to be crushed beneath its tires as it swerved and overturned. Izuku gasped as the bus hit the curb and rolled onto its side with a thundering crash. Windows exploded outward. Silence for a breath. Then they spilled out. Figures poured from the wreck like water jerky, broken silhouettes that staggered and crawled and sprinted. Some were bleeding, others already gray-skinned and glassy-eyed. They shrieked high, sharp calling. The sound clawed at Izuku's nerves, a primal scream of hunger and decay. Next to him, nestled against the window, Ochako whimpered. Her face was pale, her wide eyes reflecting the horrific scene unfolding before them. "Oh my God," Ochako whispered, pressed against the window. "There's so many." "They were in the bus," Izuku murmured, his voice shaking. Or, "they became them during the crash." His mind struggled to process it. It was like a terrible movie come to life, impossibly real and terrifyingly close. The thought that ordinary people, going about their day, could be transformed into these things was almost unbearable. The stench of burning plastic and something acridly sweet hung heavy in the air, clinging to Izuku's throat. Katsuki seemed immune, his jaw a tight line, eyes laser-focused on the road ahead. "We're not stopping. Not for anything." Katsuki clenched the wheel, swerving around a toppled trash bin, the university logo barely visible beneath layers of grime. They turned onto a side street and ran right into more chaos. People running, screaming. Some still in pajamas, clutching teddy bears or cell phones. It was only a week ago Izuku was worried about finals. Now, the prospect of ever seeing a classroom again felt like a lifetime ago. He swallowed hard, pushing the fear down. He had to focus. One man stood in the middle of the road, confused, waving frantically. "Help! My wife's." His head jerked sideways, spasmed, and he dropped to his knees. His hands clawed at his temples, tearing at his hair. Izuku stared, wide-eyed. The man's mouth opened slowly. His pupils shrank to pinpricks. It was wrong, horribly wrong. The way his limbs moved, the vacant expression. "Stop the car," Izuku said instinctively, grabbing Katsuki's arm. "Something's..." The man lunged. Straight through the windshield of the nearest car. Shards of glass sprayed like shrapnel. Inside, a woman screamed and then everything went red. Izuku turned away, bile rising in his throat. He scrubbed at his eyes, trying to erase the image. The sweet, acrid smell seemed to intensify, a constant reminder of the horror unfolding. "We can't save anyone," Katsuki said flatly, his voice devoid of emotion. "We don't even know what the hell we are doing." Izuku knew Katsuki was right. They were just two college kids, utterly unprepared for this nightmare. He didn't argue. He just looked at his phone again. The signal was weak, flickering in and out. The last emergency broadcast flickered weakly on screen, an evacuation point set up at the West Loop Medical Center. No updates. No confirmation it was still intact. But it was a direction. A sliver of hope in the overwhelming darkness. "We go west," he said, voice steadier than he felt. "Medical campus. It's probably gone, but it's a start." Maybe there's supplies, maybe people, maybe. He trailed off, unable to articulate the desperate hope clawing at his insides. Katsuki didn't say anything. Just hit the gas, the engine roaring to life. The car lurched forward, leaving the carnage behind. But the image of the man, the scream of the woman, burned into Izuku's mind. Behind them, the screams didn't stop. And the city kept burning, a macabre beacon in the twilight. They'd barely made it 2 blocks before they saw them. 3 people in the middle of the road waving their arms, screaming for help. 2 adults and a teenage girl. The woman's leg was drenched in blood, wrapped in what looked like a torn-up jacket. The man beside her held a tire iron and kept glancing behind them, eyes wild. The girl, maybe 16, stood in front of them, waving both hands above her head. "Help! Please!" she shouted. "Stop!" Izuku's heart clenched. Ochako pressed a hand against the window. "We have to stop." "No, we don't," Katsuki said immediately, foot steady on the gas. "She's a kid," Ochako snapped. "We can't just drive past them." "You think we have room? What if one of them's bitten?" "She's not. Look at her, she's fine." Izuku's mouth opened then closed again. His eyes flicked to the group. The girl's face was streaked with soot and tears. She clutched a backpack like it held her entire life. The man was shouting something Izuku couldn't hear what, but the desperation was obvious. "I don't know," Izuku murmured. "They don't look infected." "No one looks infected until it's too late." Katsuki barked. "Please," the girl screamed, sprinting into the middle of the road. Ochako reached for the door handle. Katsuki swerved. The car veered left, narrowly missing her. Izuku cried out as the girl hit the pavement, barely rolling out of the way. "What are you doing?" Ochako shouted. "We don't know them." Katsuki snapped. "We don't owe them anything. If one of them turns in the car." Izuku looked back. The man was dragging the girl to her feet, still waving, still screaming. The woman was slumped against the curb. Behind them, dark figures rounded the corner. Too many. Too fast. The man turned, saw them coming, and screamed something Izuku couldn't hear, but he saw the meaning on his face. "Sheet," Katsuki muttered, catching it in the mirror. Izuku could still see the girl's face. Not fear. Not anger. Like she didn't understand why they didn't stop. Ochako stared straight ahead now, arms folded tightly across her chest. "Next time," she said coldly, "I'll jump out if you don't." No one spoke after that. But Izuku kept looking in the mirror, long after the figures disappeared from view. The silence in the car was unbearable. Not the quiet kind, the seething kind. The kind that builds behind clenched jaws and fast, shallow breathing. Ochako finally broke it. "You didn't even hesitate," she said, voice sharp. "You just swerved around her like she was trash in the road." Katsuki's hands tightened on the wheel. "She ran in front of the car, Ochako. She was begging you. We all saw it." Izuku shifted in the back seat, suddenly wishing the vehicle were bigger. "Guys, maybe now's not." "She was a kid," Ochako snapped. "You don't get to act like you saved us by driving past her." Katsuki barked a laugh, bitter and raw. "Oh, sorry, should I have let her and her screaming dad into the car? Hope one of them doesn't cough blood on us halfway down the highway." "She wasn't coughing," Ochako shouted. "And even if she was, we don't know how this spreads yet." "Exactly." Katsuki's voice rose to match hers. "So maybe don't gamble our lives on strangers who could turn into them any second." Ochako turned to glare at him fully, unblinking. "You keep acting like being afraid gives you permission to be cruel." Katsuki slammed the wheel with an open palm. "And you keep acting like kindness is gonna save us." Izuku raised his voice. "Both of you," but then the car swerved. Katsuki slammed the brakes. Everyone lurched forward as tires screeched and the car fishtailed to a hard, grinding stop just feet away from a makeshift barricade blocking the road. Steel trash bins. Road cones. Parked cars, angled in a V shape. A plastic chair half melted from fire. Beyond it, a stretch of road covered in broken glass and scattered backpacks. Katsuki threw the gear into park. "What the hell?" Izuku muttered, peering through the windshield. Ochako sat up straighter. Was this to block them in or keep us out? Katsuki reached slowly toward the switchblade on the dash. Guess we're about to find out. And just ahead, behind the barricade, a shadow moved. The shadow moved again, closer this time. A flashlight beam cut through the dusk, searing through the windshield and forcing them all to flinch. Hands where we can see them, a voice barked. Tight with panic. Now! Katsuki raised both hands slowly off the wheel. Paco did the same. Izuku hesitated before following, heart pounding so hard he thought it might stop entirely. More lights flicked on attached to helmets. Military. 3 of them emerged from behind the barricade, rifles raised. Not just soldiers scared soldiers. Their hands trembled as they approached, boots crunching broken glass. The man in front had blood smeared down one side of his fatigues and a bandage that looked hours old. Turn the car off. Step out. One at a time. Hey, okay, we're doing it. Katsuki said, voice low and steady as he cut the engine. We're not infected. We just got out of campus. We're clean. No talking, one of the others barked. Out of the vehicle. Now. Izuku opened his door slowly, stepping out with both hands in the air. Ochako followed, her hands still trembling. Katsuki moved last, stepping between them and the soldiers instinctively. The lead soldier's eyes darted between their faces, sweat hissing down the bridge of his nose despite the cold. What building were you in? What for? Any bites? No bites, Ochako said quickly. We were in a dorm. We just ran. We didn't stop for anyone. We're not sick, Izuku added, his voice cracking. We're students, we're just trying to find shelter. Anywhere safe. The soldier flinched like the word safe hurt. His finger curled tighter around the trigger. The youngest of them, barely older than Katsuki, looked like he was about to cry. You shouldn't be here. We're locking the zone down. Orders are to turn back anyone not confirmed clear. But there's nowhere to go. Ochako pleaded. Please just let us through, even for an hour. Let us sit somewhere safe, regroup, catch our breath. No civilians past the perimeter, the leader barked. You want to breathe? Get back in your car and drive in the other direction. But Izuku started, stepping forward. A gun raised. Instantly. Level with his chest. Katsuki moved between them before he could think. Back off. His voice was quiet. Dangerous. You don't point that thing at him unless you plan to pull the trigger. The soldier didn't blink. I will. Don't test me. For a moment, they all stood in dead silence, just the whine of a distant siren and the dull pulse of Izuku's heart in his ears. Then Katsuki turned to Izuku and Ochako, voice low. Get in the car. What? Ochako whispered. We're leaving, Katsuki said. They don't want to help. And they won't hesitate to kill us just to feel like they're still in control. Ochako's eyes shone with unshed tears, but she nodded. Izuku moved in a daze, backing toward the car. The soldiers watched them the whole way, guns never lowering. As they slid back into the vehicle, Katsuki fired the engine again and slowly reversed, turning the car back the way they came. No one spoke until the roadblock was out of sight. Then Katsuki muttered, He drove faster. And none of them looked back. The sky was bleeding into dusk by the time Katsuki turned off the main road. They'd driven in silence for nearly 20 minutes, weaving through backstreets and cracked service roads until the city skyline faded into the rearview. What replaced it was quieter, small homes, overgrown lawns, and streets where no one had run screaming, at least, not recently. Ochako sat curled against the door, eyes red but dry. Izuku had stopped checking his phone. The battery was nearly dead, and none of the emergency broadcasts made sense anymore. Katsuki finally broke the silence. We'll stop here. Edge of the city. Residential. Low population density. His voice was rough from hours of tension. Whatever those things are, they followed the noise. Chaos. Sirens. They emptied the dorms as soon as the screaming started. You think this place'll be clear? Izuku asked, blinking tiredly. Katsuki slowed the car, turning onto a narrow street lined with modest homes. If there were any in this neighborhood, they probably followed the wave downtown. What if they didn't? Ochako said, her voice soft. What if they're still inside? Then we check carefully. And we run fast. They drove until Katsuki spotted what he was looking for, a small, one-story house tucked behind a wooden fence. Curtains drawn. No broken windows. No bloodstains. Just stillness. Here, he said, pulling into the cracked driveway. The gas light had been on for the last 5 miles. This is it. We're out of fuel anyway. The car sputtered to a halt, the engine giving a tired final cough. Izuku reached for the bat beside his feet. Ochako pulled her stick close. Katsuki already had his blade. Let's sweep it, he said. Quiet, Fess. If we're lucky, it's empty. 15 tense minutes later, they had their answer. The house was clear. Dusty but intact. 2 bedrooms. A living room with sagging couches. Kitchen stocked with canned soup and expired cereal. No sign of the owners, no blood, no sign of struggle. The power was still on, dim, flickering, but working. So was the tap water, cool and clean. Izuku leaned against the kitchen counter, finally allowing his hands to shake. I think we're okay, he said. For now, Katsuki replied, double-checking the back door lock. Don't let your guard down. Ochako sank into one of the old couches, staring blankly at the floor. Do you think they lived here? The people? And just ran? Maybe, Izuku said, sitting down across from her. Maybe they saw it coming and left early. Katsuki tossed his bag onto the floor and stretched. Or maybe they didn't make it. Either way, we've got shelter and running water. We'll take the win. Ochako really looked at him and for once, didn't argue. Outside, the last of the sun dipped below the trees, and the neighborhood slipped into silence. Not the kind from before. Not peaceful. But still enough to sleep if they could. Ochako didn't move from the couch that night. She clutched her lacrosse stick even in sleep, fingers curled so tight around the taped handle it had left faint lines across her skin. Katsuki had insisted on taking first watch. So they let him. But Izuku couldn't sleep either. His mind was too loud, too unsure, like if he closed his eyes, everything would start again. So they stayed up, talking, whispering in the dark like it wouldn't hear them if they kept their voices low enough. They've been holed up in this house ever since. 1 month. 34 days, technically. Izuku had counted them on the edge of a windowsill using a marker that barely worked. The house was small but secure. Old, creaky but intact. 2 bedrooms. Faded yellow wallpaper. Water that still ran cold from its own underground system, and power that somehow was still alive. But they didn't use it much. Just enough to charge phones they barely checked anymore. Just enough to keep the lights low, never bright. They didn't want to draw attention. They didn't know what was watching. Most nights were silent, filled with cautious whispers and the soft sound of someone breathing too hard in their sleep. Tonight, Izuku sat on the living room floor with his knees drawn up, pen scratching over the pages of a half-used notebook. The writing helped. It made things feel less distant. Less impossible. It's been a month. Food's almost gone. We've been rationing the canned soups, beans, whatever was in the cupboards when we got here. Kaken found a half-full propane tank out back. And we've been stretching it, but it won't last. None of it will. We've been careful with the water, filling every jug and bottle we could find in case the pressure cuts out. We're doing everything right. But we need more. Izuku paused, chewing his bottom lip. You writing about me? He flinched slightly and looked up. Katsuki stood in the hallway, leaning against the frame with his arms crossed. The hood of his borrowed sweatshirt was down, and his hair was a mess of waves that hadn't been washed in days. His voice wasn't accusing, just curious. Izuku let out a quiet breath. Not everything's about you. Katsuki stepped into the room and dropped onto the couch with a groan. Bet it's mostly about me though. Izuku smirked, but didn't answer. He tapped his pen once against the notebook, then closed it. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, just the hum of the refrigerator and the whisper of the wind against the windows. You think she's okay? Katsuki asked eventually, nodding toward the other room where Ochako slept. She's strong, Izuku said. But I think she's tired of pretending to be. Katsuki nodded. Aren't we all? Izuku didn't say it, but he agreed. They'd lasted this long on fear, instinct, and luck. But now, supplies were almost gone. The quiet wasn't safety anymore, it was starvation waiting behind closed doors. They needed to move. So, Izuku tapped his notebook once more, fingers lingering on the closed cover. The flashlight flickered against the wall, casting long, tired shadows. I think we need to go out tomorrow, he said quietly. Katsuki didn't react at first. He just stared ahead, eyes unfocused. Then finally, a sigh. Yeah. I figured that was coming. The food won't last another week, Izuku said. And if the water stops running, we'll be screwed. Been screwed since day one, Katsuki muttered. This is just the slow version. Izuku didn't smile. We need to find somewhere with supplies. A corner store. A pharmacy. Anything. Katsuki nodded slowly. Tomorrow. Early. Izuku hesitated, voice dropping a little. We should also start paying attention to them. Katsuki glanced over. The things outside? We still don't know what they are, Izuku said. Or how far this has spread. What they respond to. How fast it's moving. All we know is what we saw that first night. Katsuki tilted his head. Didn't really feel like science when one tried to bite my face off. I'm not trying to study them, Izuku said quickly. Not really. I just want to be smart about this. If we're going back out there, we need to understand what we're walking into. Katsuki leaned back against the couch and rubbed his jaw. So you want to go shopping and people watch the infected? I want to survive, Izuku said. And knowing what we're up against might help. There was a long pause. Katsuki didn't argue. Not this time. Finally he said, Alright. We head out tomorrow. Take back roads. Stay out of sight. Grab what we can, get back before dark. Izuku nodded. And if we see them again? Katsuki's voice was steady. We run. Unless we have no choice. Outside, the wind picked up. Somewhere in the distance, something shrieked long and thin, like it was calling for something else. Neither of them flinched. They just sat in the quiet, staring into the dark, already thinking about tomorrow. Izuku didn't remember falling asleep. One minute he was scribbling notes about movement patterns and half-formed theories in the margins of his notebook. The next, Katsuki was shaking his shoulder, gently but firm. Hey, Katsuki said. It's time. Izuku blinked into the morning light bleeding through the blinds. The living room was still dim, quiet. The air felt cooler than it had in days. He sat up slowly, rubbing his face. His body ached from sleeping in a crooked position, and his brain took a few seconds to reboot. The world hadn't ended again in the night, but it hadn't gotten better either. Ochako stood near the front door, already dressed. Her hair was tied back in a quick braid, her lacrosse stick strapped to the side of a small backpack. Katsuki had one too larger, more worn, the kind with duct tape across the seams. He tossed a third bag down at Izuku's feet. Empty. Ready. Izuku looked at both of them, confused for a heartbeat. You guys are all ready? Didn't sleep much, Ochako said softly. Figured it was better to be ready before the sun was too high. Katsuki shrugged, adjusting the strap of his bag. It's gonna be hot. And the less daylight we waste, the better. Izuku nodded, still pulling himself out of sleep. He picked up the backpack and moved to his feet, joints protesting. Okay, just give me a second. Take your time, Ochako said gently. We'll wait. But they didn't sound like they could wait long. The quiet felt thinner this morning. The silence heavier. Izuku took breath, moving to gather his notebook, his bat, and the water bottle they'd been refilling every other day. He tucked the bat through the side loop of his pack and glanced toward the window. The street outside was still. No screams. No movement. But the world didn't feel safe. Just waiting. The door creaked shut behind them with a finality that made Izuku's stomach twist. Katsuki locked it out of habit, even though they all knew that if something really wanted in, that lock wouldn't stop it. The neighborhood was quiet. Too quiet. No wind. No birdsong. Just the soft crunch of gravel beneath their boots as they stepped onto the street, backpacks slung over shoulders, weapons at their sides. Izuku had expected it to feel familiar. It didn't. The road they'd walked so many times that first week now looked like something out of a forgotten world. Lawns were overgrown, pushing past fences and spilling into the sidewalks. Weeds had broken through cracks in the pavement, growing in wild green bursts that hadn't been there a month ago. Ivy clawed up the sides of abandoned houses, twisting around shutters like fingers reaching in. Even the air felt heavier. Like the world had exhaled and hadn't drawn breath again. Feels like it's been longer than a month, Ochako whispered. Izuku nodded silently. The small gas station 3 blocks down had already been looted, shelves bare, windows broken, the place reeking of mold and something worse. They didn't even slow down this time. I told you, Katsuki muttered, adjusting the grip on his switchblade. Everything around here was picked clean the first week. Anyone left already cleared out or turned. So we're heading into the city, Izuku said. Not a question. Katsuki just nodded. It's riskier. But if anything's left, it'll be deeper in. Maybe places people couldn't get to before things went to hell. They turned down a side street where a row of trees had started to split the sidewalk apart. A DLVI truck sat parked half on the curb, vines coiled through its open driver's side window like it had been sitting there for years instead of weeks. Izuku couldn't stop looking at it. Stick to the side streets until we're closer, Katsuki said. We don't want to be out in the open if a low creak echoed ahead of them. All 3 froze. Izuku gripped his bat tighter, heart climbing into his throat. A plastic swing moved gently in the breeze, creaking as it rocked. Just the wind. But for a second, it sounded too much like breathing. They didn't speak after that. They just kept walking toward the city, toward whatever waited inside. They needed food. They needed answers. And Izuku, despite himself, needed to see how far this had really gone. They were halfway down a stretch of cracked road when Izuku saw it. A deer. It stepped out from between 2 rusted mailboxes, quiet and surreal, its hooves tapping softly against the pavement. A young buck, lean and light-footed, with a torn ear and twitching eyes. For a moment, it looked like a memory from before the world fell apart. Then it stopped in the middle of the road, head lifting. Katsuki raised his arm, already reaching for the knife at his side. That's meat. Izuku grabbed his arm. Don't, he said, too sharp, too sudden. Katsuki stared at him. We're running out of food. I know. But look at it. The deer hadn't bolted. It just stood there, staring at them, unmoving. Its chest rose and fell in a slow, unnatural rhythm. Ochako took a half-step closer, then froze. Izuku's breath caught. The left side of the deer's face was rotting. Not like roadkill. Not like age or injury. Its flesh had sloughed away near the jaw, exposing bone and raw sinew. From the wound, pale fungal growths protruded, thin, branching stalks with gray spores clinging to their tops like dew. They pulsed faintly with each breath the deer took. What the hell? Katsuki muttered, stepping back. The deer turned its head slowly, almost too slowly. It looked at them. Really looked. Its eyes were milky and clouded, but its gaze felt deliberate. Izuku's voice was barely above a whisper. It's infected. But it's not, Ochako started. It's not like the others, Izuku finished. The deer didn't charge. It just stared for one long, tense moment. Then it turned and trotted off the road, disappearing into the overgrown brush with the same eerie stillness it had arrived, with fungal growths swaying gently behind it like weeds in a breeze. None of them moved. The silence returned like a weight. Katsuki exhaled slowly. So it's not just people? Izuku didn't answer right away. He just stared at the space where the deer had been, a cold knot forming in his stomach. If the infection can jump species, he said quietly, we've been underestimating it since day one. Ochako's grip on her stick tightened. Then we need to be more careful. Izuku finally nodded, eyes scanning the trees. Yeah, he murmured. Much more. They moved on in silence at first, still shaken from the encounter. Izuku couldn't stop looking over his shoulder. Not because he expected the deer to return, but because it had looked at them. Not like prey. Not like an animal at all. It had registered them. And it was still thinking. They were halfway past a broken-down billboard when he finally spoke. We need to understand this better. Katsuki grunted. Understand what exactly? The part where woodland creatures are rotting from the face down and still walking. I'm serious. Izuku glanced between them, slowing his pace. That deer wasn't feral. It wasn't rabid. It didn't charge. It just saw us. Like it was still there, under all that. Ochako made a quiet sound, something like a nervous scoff. You think it was aware? I think it's a sign, Izuku said, that this infection is more complicated than we thought. It's not just turning people into mindless husks, it's adapting. If it jumped to deer, it could jump again. Maybe it's already in birds. Rodents. Anything. So what? Katsuki said flatly. You want to write a thesis on it? Izuku stopped walking. No. I want to survive it. And I don't think we're going to if we keep treating this like some basic virus or TV zombie apocalypse. If we don't learn how it works, how it spreads, how it thinks, then we're just running blind. Ochako shook her head. That's assuming it can be understood. We've seen what it does to people, Izuku. We've seen it rip through crowds like nothing. The last time we saw the world, it was collapsing. And that was a month ago, Izuku said. We haven't seen anything since. What if there's a pattern to it? What if there are stages or rules we don't know? That deer might have been a carrier. What if it wasn't contagious anymore? What if it was? Katsuki snapped. You gonna dissect it with a soup spoon and a half-dead flashlight? Izuku didn't answer. He wasn't angry. Just thinking. I don't want to study it because I'm curious, he said quietly. I want to study it because I'm scared. That quiet sat between them for a moment, thick and real. Ochako exhaled slowly, hugging herself. I get that. I do. But I don't want to poke it with a stick just to see what happens. I want to stay alive. Katsuki adjusted his grip on the backpack strap and looked away. We should keep moving. Izuku nodded, but the thought didn't leave him. The infection was changing. And if they didn't figure out how, then it didn't matter how much food they found. They wouldn't be prepared for what came next. They didn't speak much after that. The conversation about the deer left a bitter taste between them, something unspoken and heavy, like the first hint of rot in canned food. Izuku kept his thoughts to himself, Katsuki scanned every rooftop, and Ochako held her stick like it might break in her hands if she let go. Eventually they found it. A single-story strip mall nestled between two office buildings, half covered in ivy and scorched by smoke. The letters on the closest shop had long since fallen off, but the sun-faded outlines still read, Kenwood Market. The glass front was intact miraculously but caked with dust and grime. A few vines had curled through the cracks around the doorframe, giving the entire building an abandoned, overgrown look. Looks quiet, Katsuki said, stepping up to the entrance. Ochako gave him a dry look. That's what scares me. Izuku moved to the side and peered through the grime-smudged glass. It was hard to see much, but the outlines of dusty shelves and toppled baskets were still visible. It didn't look like it had been touched in weeks. Could be picked clean, Katsuki said. But maybe not. Ochako tried the handle. But Katsuki was already pulling a crowbar from his pack. Wait, Izuku said, holding up a hand. We make noise and will draw attention. Katsuki stared at him. If there's something inside, it already knows we're here. Izuku hesitated, then nodded. Katsuki wedged the crowbar under the doorframe and snapped the latch with a quick pop of metal. The sound echoed down the street, but nothing answered. He pushed the door open slowly, weapon in hand. The air inside was stale and warm. The smell hit them immediately, dust, decay, something long past expired. It wasn't the reek of death, but it wasn't far from it. They stepped in carefully, shoes crunching on glass from a broken jar that must have fallen weeks ago. Izuku's eyes adjusted to the dim light filtering through the grime-coated windows. Shelves were mostly bare, but not entirely. A few cans still sat scattered between discarded boxes. A dusty display of instant noodles had collapsed in one corner. Split up, Katsuki said, voice low. Stay close. Quiet. Ochako nodded, already heading toward the far aisle. Izuku lingered near the front, eyes scanning for movement, for shadows, for signs that something had claimed this place before them. So far nothing. It was the first time they'd been inside a building other than the house in over a month. And it felt like the world had frozen here, mid-collapse. Like whatever had come for the city had just moved on. But Izuku didn't believe in that kind of luck. Not anymore. Izuku moved slowly, scanning the shelves for anything that might have been overlooked. Most of it was useless empty boxes, crushed packaging, a bag of rice torn open and molded from moisture. Still, he kept moving, weaving between the aisles, deeper toward the back of the store. It was darker here. Quieter. He stepped over an overturned shopping cart and pushed past a stack of collapsed cardboard boxes near the stockroom door. The faint smell of rot thickened in the air, not strong enough to GG, but enough to make his stomach twist. He stopped. In the corner, near the emergency exit door, two shapes lay crumpled in the gloom. Corpses. Izuku's breath caught in his throat. He crouched low, instinctively quiet. His fingers tightened around the bat looped through his pack. One of the bodies was sprawled on its side, dried blood pooled beneath it, its limbs twisted at unnatural angles. A husk of a person. Hollow-eyed and still. No movement. No fungal growth. The other wasn't the same. It had collapsed against the wall like it had been thrown there. Its chest had split open, and from the torn cavity, a mass of fungus had sprouted pale stalks and long, ropus strands that clung to the floor and the bottom of the emergency exit like roots. They stretched outward in all directions, embedded into the tile like they'd grown down and in. Izuku froze. He counted the distance to the door. To the front of the store. He couldn't hear Ochako or Katsuki anymore. Just the buzz of flies. The hum of dead lights. He crept forward slowly, eyes fixed on the fungal corpse. It didn't move. No sound. Just those strange tendrils, branching outward like veins. Izuku scanned the ground and found a condented label half-ripped. He crouched lower and gently tossed it forward. It hit the corpse with a hollow thunk. For a second, nothing. Then a burst. A thin, gray cloud of spores erupted from the corpse, puffing upward like dust shaken from an old rug. Izuku instinctively pulled his hoodie over his mouth, backing up a step. The spores drifted, slow and eerie in the dark. That's when the second body moved. It stirred. A slow twitch of the leg. A flex of the fingers. Then its head rolled to one side and the eyes opened. Izuku's breath hitched. Not blind. Not fogged. Alive. Or something like it. It exhaled sharply through what was left of its nose. Then it twitched again, a sharp, sudden JRK, like a puppet snapping to attention. Izuku took a step back. It sat up, and it turned its head straight toward him. The thing sat up completely now, bones cracking beneath its skin. Its mouth opened not in a growl, but in a slurred, wheezing gasp. "Don't let them take me." Izuku froze. The voice was broken, breathy but human. It echoed with something real, something remembered. Not the creature's thoughts, but someone else's. A dying echo. The thing staggered to its feet, legs shaky but fast to correct. Izuku took another step back, knocking into a box. Its head tilted at the sound. "Please, don't let them take me." Then it lunged. Izuku turned and ran. The shelves blurred past as he sprinted through the back of the store. Behind him, the thing's footsteps slapped unevenly against the tile, fast and frantic, limbs jerking unnaturally. Izuku skidded around a corner, heart hammering, and shoved through a half-collapsed aisle of cleaning products. The thing crashed into the end of the shelf. It wobbled, groaned, and fell. An avalanche of metal and broken plastic thundered to the floor, shaking the whole store. Izuku tripped and hit the ground hard, arms scraping against the linoleum. "Deku!" Katsuki's voice bellowed from the front. The creature was already crawling through the wreckage, shrieking, its mouth still mouthing the same phrase in a voice that didn't belong to it. "Don't let them take me." The sound of Katsuki's crowbar slamming into skull echoed like a gunshot. Then another. And another. The shrieking stopped. Izuku rolled over, gasping. Katsuki stood above the twitching body, chest heaving, face pale. Ochako came skidding in a second later, eyes wide. What happened? Izuku sat up slowly. It remembered something. It wasn't it was someone else. "What?" she breathed. "Like, mimicking them?" I think, Izuku swallowed. I think it said whatever the host said before it died. They didn't have time to process it. From outside the store a scream. Not human. Long piercing. Answering. Ochako backed toward the front door, eyes scanning. That's a call. More shrieks answered from farther down the block. What? Then 3. Then more. They were coming. Katsuki grabbed Izuku's arm and yanked him to his feet. We're not making it back the way we came. Then where do we go? Ochako asked, panic seeping in. Izuku looked out the front window. Shadows moved between buildings. Figures stumbling. Sprinting. He pointed across the intersection toward the maze of alleyways beyond. Deeper into the city. Katsuki didn't argue. They ran. The city was alive again. But not with life. They ran. Izuku didn't know how many were behind them anymore. He'd lost count after the first dozen. What began as a few stumbling figures had turned into a sea of shrieking, lunging bodies pouring from windows, alleys, broken doorways. They came in waves. Claws scraping pavement. Mouths open. Screaming. Ochako led, her braid bouncing wildly as she sprinted. Katsuki took up the rear, his crowbar dripping from the last one he'd cracked in the jaw. Izuku ran in the middle, bat clutched tight, lungs burning. Left. Ochako shouted, cutting across a twisted bike rack. They dove into another street, an alley winding and narrow, littered with broken trash bins and cracked pavement. Izuku's chest screamed for air. The walls closed in around them, too tight for 3 people to run side by side. Keep going. Katsuki barked. Behind them, the horde surged forward. Dozens, maybe more. The sound was deafening. Bone against concrete. Barked words from dead mouths. One of them repeated something like a name. Charlie, Charlie, Charlie. Over and over, like it didn't know how to stop. Ochako rounded a corner and stopped. Izuku slammed into her back, nearly knocking them both down. What? Dead end. A brick wall stretched up 20 feet, covered in old vines and shattered glass. No ladders. No fire escape. Just solid stone and a door bolted shut with rusted chains. Izuku's breath hitched, a ragged gasp that did nothing to fill his aching lungs. The alley was a trap. The deafening pursuit, the relentless thudding of feet and gurgling groans, vibrated through the soles of his worn sneakers. He could feel the sheer presence of the dead pressing in, a suffocating wave of decay and hunger. No, Ochako whispered, her voice tight with disbelief. She spun around, her eyes wide with a dawning horror that mirrored Izuku's own. Katsuki's roar was immediate, a furious bellow that echoed off the grimy brick walls. Are you kidding me? He shoved past Izuku, his powerful frame a coiled spring of pure frustration. He slammed his crowbar against the brick wall, the clang ringing harshly in the narrow space. This is it? Izuku's mind, usually so quick to analyze and solve, felt sluggish, numbed by terror. He could see the lead figures of the horde spill into the alley behind them, their guttural emptiness accelerating. They were a tide of undeath, their vacant eyes fixed on their prey. They turned together, weapons raised, chests heaving. There was nowhere left to run. Izuku grabbed Ochako's arm. I'm sorry. Then fire. The front row of infected burst into flame with a sharp whoosh, like gasoline catching a spark. Screeches became howls as the first few stumbled, dropped, flailed against each other. The ones behind slammed into the burning bodies and recoiled, thrashing violently. Izuku's eyes widened. What the? A voice sharp, low, commanding cut through the chaos. In here. Move. A side door swung open to their right, half hidden by a dumpster. A tall figure stood silhouetted in the smoke, face masked by a cloth wrap, one gloved hand holding a Molotov, the other waving them in. Katsuki didn't hesitate. He grabbed Izuku and shoved him forward. Go! Ochako ducked through the door next. Katsuki followed and slammed the door behind them, throwing the bolt just as another echo slammed against it from the other side. They were plunged into near darkness, just the flicker of firelight seeping through the cracks and the sound of burning bodies outside. The stranger lowered the Molotov and pulled off their face covering, eyes sharp and unreadable. You just made a lot of noise, they said calmly. You'd better be worth the trouble. For a long moment, no one moved. Izuku leaned back against the wall, heart pounding so hard it hurt. Sweat stung his eyes. His lungs ached from smoke, adrenaline, and the sprint that had nearly killed him. Ochako slid to the floor beside him, hands trembling against her thighs. Her stick clattered to the ground. She didn't pick it up. Katsuki stayed standing, jaw tight, staring at the door like it might burst open any second. It didn't. Izuku's voice came out hoarse. We almost died. No one argued. He looked down at his hands. They were shaking. Badly. He hadn't even noticed until now. Ochako nodded slowly, still catching her breath. That was a horde. Not a group. A horde. City's full of them now, said the voice calm, low, tired. Izuku looked up. The guy who saved them stood at the far wall, arms crossed over a weather-worn hoodie, face streaked faintly with soot. His split-dyed hair, once red and white, had faded to something soft and uneven, like candy bleached in the sun. The contrast made his sharp expression stand out even more. Cold. Unreadable. He didn't look proud of what he'd done. Or even relieved. Just resigned. You all right? He asked, but it didn't sound like he really cared. Katsuki straightened. We're breathing. That's enough. Barely, Ochako mumbled. Izuku stepped forward, cautious. Thanks for pulling us out of that. The guy gave a tight nod. Didn't do it for you. Did it so they wouldn't tear through this place next. Izuku blinked. Right. Okay. I'm Shoto, the guy said. Shoto Todoroki. This is our safe zone. You're lucky I saw you before that crowd caught up. Ochako pushed herself up. Is it just you here? Shoto shook his head. Second floor. 5 of us total. You'll meet them. Maybe. If you don't PSS anyone off. He turned and headed down the hall without waiting for a response. Katsuki muttered under his breath. Friendly guy. Izuku couldn't help it, he cracked a smile. They followed him up a set of stairs to the second floor. The building was surprisingly well fortified, windows reinforced with scrap metal, doorways barricaded with shelving and cabinets. It wasn't fancy, but it was safe. Home in the apocalypse. Voices filtered from the hallway as they approached, a mixture of laughter and casual bickering. Shoto stopped at the last door and knocked twice. It opened to a chaotic but strangely comforting sight. Inside, a girl with bright eyes and colorful beads woven into her braids lit up the moment she saw them. Oh, new blood, she grinned. You really do collect strays, huh, Shoto? Shoto rolled his eyes. Don't start, Mina. She stepped forward, extending a hand toward Ochako with a warm, disarming smile. Mina Ishido. Welcome to the bunker. Behind her, 2 guys stood side by side, clearly in the middle of a stupid joke, one with his shirt half-tucked, laughing too loudly. Eijiro Kirishima, the louder one said proudly, giving a dramatic flex. Resident muscle. And Denki, said the second guy with a smile, nodding casually. Denki Kaminari. Ignore him, he hasn't stopped trying to wrestle walls since week 2. From the far corner of the room, another voice chimed in, dry and unimpressed. New people. More mouths to feed. A girl sat on a windowsill, arms crossed, eyes narrowed beneath a messy bun of dark hair. Kyoka, she added flatly. Don't get comfortable. Shoto stepped past them and dropped what was left of his Molotov supplies on a counter. They're not staying unless they pull their weight. Katsuki raised a brow. And what exactly is the weight here? Survive, Shoto said simply. Everything else is negotiable. Izuku looked around the room at the makeshift bedding, the lanterns hung from the ceiling, the stacks of scavenged supplies. For the first time in hours, he let himself breathe. They weren't alone anymore. But he wasn't sure if that made them safer. Or just more exposed. For a while, the group just sat. Not in silence, exactly, but in that dazed kind of stillness that follows survival by inches. Ochako curled up with a blanket someone had handed her. Izuku nursed a bruised arm and kept glancing toward the window like the fire outside might reach through it. Katsuki stood by the door, arms crossed, not trusting the lock or anyone else in the room. Mina Ishido was the first to break the ice. So, she said, plopping down near Ochako with a bright, curious smile, where exactly did you three come from? And how the hell did you survive this long? Katsuki immediately tensed. Izuku opened his mouth, but Ochako beat him to it. We were living out on the edge of the city. Little two-bedroom house with a busted fence and a water tank that still worked. We stumbled on it the night everything collapsed. Katsuki figured people would panic toward the city center, and he was right. Kyoka let out a low whistle. Lucky find. Smarter than it sounds, Ochako said, clearly trying not to look at Katsuki when she said it. It kept us safe. For a while. We stayed quiet, rationed food. Never used power unless we had to. Barely looked out the windows. Idru raised a brow. So you were ghosts? Basically, Ochako said. Until the food started to run out. Denki nudged a box of granola bars toward her. Well, welcome to the real apocalypse. Noisy, bloody, and full of charming company. Ochako smiled, exhausted but genuine. Thanks. Izuku leaned forward slightly, voice careful but excited. We've seen a lot of weird things out there. The infection, it's not acting like anything we expected. There are stages. Behavior changes. And the deer. Oh no, Katsuki muttered. He stepped back from the door, running a hand over his face. Here we go. Izuku pushed on. We saw a deer infected with fungus like a carrier. It wasn't aggressive. And at that market we scavenged, one of the infected repeated something. The last thing it said before dying. Idru tilted his head. You sure it wasn't just echoing? That's what I mean, Izuku said. It echoed the person. Their voice. Their memory. It wasn't just random sound. Kyoka raised a brow. Creepy. Mina made a face. Like parrots but worse. Izuku nodded quickly. Exactly. And then when I triggered the spore bloom. Triggered? Katsuki cut in sharply. You mean set off a body full of fungus that nearly got you killed? Again. Izuku's face flushed. I had to know what would happen. You didn't have to, Katsuki snapped. You chose to in the middle of a dark room, alone, with no backup. The room went still. Wait, Shoto said, finally speaking from the corner. That screamer, that was you? Izuku looked sheepish. It was kind of a chain reaction. Shoto's jaw flexed. You brought a horde down on us. Izuku opened his mouth, but Katsuki spoke first. He does this. Obsesses over facts while the rest of us are trying to survive. Izuku stood now, frustrated. Because survival without understanding is just a slower death. Ochako stepped between them, palms raised. Guys. Not here. Mina glanced between them, eyebrows high. So, we're fun and functional. Great. Idru muttered, I give it a week. Kyoka rolled her eyes. You're too optimistic. Shoto just shook his head and turned toward the hallway. We'll talk in the morning. You're safe tonight. Try not to get us all killed. The quiet that followed the last argument wasn't peace, it was pressure. Izuku could still feel the weight of Katsuki's glare. His own skin itched with leftover adrenaline and the sting of saying too much. Shoto stood with arms crossed, silhouetted in the hallway doorway. His eyes scanned each of them like he was still deciding whether they were worth the oxygen. Sleeping arrangements, he said. You're split. Katsuki straightened. What? You heard me. Shoto stepped into the room, slow and deliberate. You don't sleep in a group. Not here. You're new and I don't know you. I've seen what happens when people turn overnight. So until I trust you, you're sleeping separate. Katsuki took a step forward, defensive already. We've been together since the start. If one of us was infected, we'd know. You sure? Shoto asked coolly. Because people lie. Or they don't know they're infected. And one bite's all it takes. So yeah, you're split. Ochako raised her hand slightly, trying to ease the mood. Okay, but can't we stay near each other? Same room or? No, Shoto cut in. You're each with one of us. Someone who knows what to do if things go bad. That hung in the air like a threat. Kyoka raised a brow from the couch. You're assigning us as guard dogs? Shoto didn't respond. Fine, he said. Ochako, you're with Mina and Kyoka. Last door left. Mina grinned, rising from her spot on the floor. I do love a sleepover. Kyoka just rolled her eyes. Better than baby sitting the paranoid one. Katsuki, Shoto continued. You're with Aijuru and Denki. Second door. You try anything, they'll knock your teeth in before you blink. Aijuru cracked his knuckles with a smirk. Sleep tight. Katsuki didn't move. You don't trust us. No, Shoto said flatly. I don't. You showed up in the middle of a swarm. You brought it with you. You triggered one in a store. And one of you plays scientist in his free time. Izuku's throat tightened. Shoto's eyes settled on him last. You're with me. Izuku blinked. Why me? Because I want the talker close, Shoto said. And if you start experimenting in the dark again, I'd rather be the one to put you down. That landed like a punch. Katsuki stepped forward, voice sharp. If you so much as touch him. I won't have to, Shoto said. If he's clean. If you're all clean. Ochako grabbed Katsuki's arm gently. It's okay. Really. We're still together. We're not, he muttered, but he didn't fight it. Mina slung an arm around Ochako's shoulder and pulled her down the hall. Come on. I'll even give you the bed without the spring that stabs people. Aijuro clapped Katsuki on the back. Let's snore through the apocalypse, yeah? Denki followed, tossing a wink. Don't worry. We bite way less than the monsters. Kyoka moved after them, nodding to Shoto. I'll be awake if they start screaming. Izuku grabbed his bag and looked at Katsuki one last time. I'll be fine. Katsuki didn't answer. Just turned and followed the others down the hall. Shoto held the door open behind him, silent. Izuku stepped inside, the weight of the night heavier than ever. Shoto didn't speak as he led Izuku down the hall. His footsteps were steady, controlled, like everything he did was calculated 2 steps ahead. Izuku followed quietly, trying to ignore how the walls felt narrower with each step. They stopped at the first door on the right. Shoto opened it and stepped inside without ceremony. The room was sparse bare walls, one window blacked out with a blanket, 2 sleeping bags laid on opposite sides of the floor. A crowbar leaned against the wall near Shoto's side. The other side was empty, clearly untouched. No pictures. No clutter. Just function. Izuku hovered in the doorway. Shoto glanced back at him. You coming in or waiting for applause? Izuku stepped inside, the door clicking shut behind him. They stood in silence for a moment. The air between them was stiff, like a wire pulled taut. I didn't mean to put anyone in danger, Izuku said finally, voice quiet. At the store. I didn't know what would happen when I triggered the spores. Shoto didn't look at him. He was removing his boots with calm, deliberate movements. But you did it anyway. I was trying to understand it. Why? Izuku blinked. Because no one else is. Because we've been hiding in that house for a month with nothing but questions. What they are. How it works. Whether it spreads through bites or spores or both. If they still think if there's anything left of the people inside. We've been surviving in the dark. Shoto sat down on his sleeping bag, finally looking at Izuku. His expression was unreadable, too neutral to be angry, but too focused to be indifferent. That curiosity's going to get you killed, he said. Izuku crossed his arms. Maybe. But not knowing is worse. You're not a scientist out here. You're bait. Izuku's jaw clenched. You think I'm reckless? I know you're reckless, Shoto said calmly. You set off a corpse like it was a lab rat and woke something up that should have stayed dead. It wasn't dead, Izuku said. It was dormant. That matters. Shoto studied him in silence. Izuku could feel the weight of it, like Shoto was measuring him for something important and invisible. You ever had to kill someone? Shoto asked suddenly. Izuku hesitated. No. Just infected. Then you don't know where the line is yet. And you won't until it's already behind you. Izuku didn't know what to say to that. Shoto laid back on his sleeping bag, arms behind his head, staring up at the ceiling. You're not the first smart guy I've met since this started, he said. Most of them didn't make it a week. Izuku sat down on the opposite side, hands fidgeting in his lap. I made it a month. Shoto didn't smile. But he didn't argue either. The room settled into quiet. Not comfortable, but real. And that was enough. For now. The silence stretched between them. Not hostile, but taut, like neither of them quite knew how to share the room with another breathing person. Minutes passed. Izuku lay back, staring at the ceiling. Sleep didn't come. Eventually, he turned onto his side and unzipped his backpack, pulling out a battered notebook and a stub of a pencil worn smooth from habit. He sat up, angling himself toward the window where the faintest thread of light filtered through the blanket nailed over it. He flipped past pages of rough sketches, scribbled thoughts, half-formed theories, and started writing. Shoto didn't move. But after a minute, his voice drifted out from the dark. You write every night? Izuku jumped slightly, the pencil pausing mid-word. Yeah, kinda. Helps me think. The pause. What are you thinking about now? Izuku glanced over. Shoto was still lying flat, arms folded behind his head, eyes closed but listening. Izuku chewed the corner of his lip, then looked down at the notebook. I'm trying to organize what we know about them, he said. Patterns, reactions, behaviors. Shoto was quiet again, but Izuku knew he hadn't fallen asleep. I'm calling them echoes, Izuku added after a moment. That made Shoto's eyes open. He didn't turn his head, just stared up at the ceiling. Echoes? Izuku nodded, more to himself than anything. Yeah. Because of what they do. We've seen 2, maybe 3 that repeated things. Like, exactly what their host said right before turning. Word for word. Same tone. Like something got stuck. Shoto was still for a second. Then he spoke. They don't consciously echo. It's not like they talk. I know, Izuku said quickly. I don't think they're aware of it. It's not communication, it's just residue. But it always happens the same way. A phrase. Never changes. Never continues. Like a broken record. Shoto nodded slowly. I've heard a few do it, he said. Always the same phrase. Like the brain shuts down and leaves one part spinning. You hit play, and it just loops. Izuku's pencil hovered above the page. That's why it scares me, he murmured. Because if something like that survives, if speech patterns or final thoughts can get imprinted, then maybe more can survive. Maybe emotion. Reflex. Instinct. Shoto didn't say anything. Izuku wrote down the word again. Echoes. Neatly. Decisively. A name. I think they're more than infected, he said softly. They're remnants. Copies of people. But corrupted. Echoes of who they were. Shoto finally turned his head toward him. Maybe, he said. Or maybe they're just empty. And we're the ones filling in the meaning. Izuku met his eyes. Does it make a difference? Shoto stared at him for a moment. Only if you're stupid enough to hesitate. Izuku looked down again. Scribbled something in the margin of the page. He wasn't sure if that was a warning or advice. Izuku's pencil hovered over the page again, unmoving. He hesitated, then glanced across the room at Shoto. The spores. Shoto didn't respond at first. Izuku tried again. Back at the market. The body I hit with the can, it released a cloud, and the one next to it woke up. Why do you think that happened? Shoto exhaled through his nose, long and quiet. I've seen that before, he said finally. Twice. Once in a parking garage. Once in a subway entrance. Izuku sat up a little straighter, eyes locked on him. What happened? There was a corpse. Looked like just another body, blood dry, half decomposed. But there was growth. Fungal. From the chest cavity. Long tendrils, like roots, stretching out across the floor. Like mine, Izuku murmured. Shoto nodded faintly. You step on it, move it, even breathe too close. And it releases spores. Not always visible. Sometimes you just hear the hiss. Izuku scribbled quickly, flipping to a fresh page. But why did the other one move? The one that wasn't connected to the fungus. That's the part one don't know, Shoto admitted. Some of them. They're dormant. Not dead, just waiting. Like traps. The spore cloud must have triggered something. Maybe sound. Maybe chemical. Izuku stared at the floor. And you think the spores can infect someone? Shoto didn't answer immediately. We don't get close enough to find out. Izuku's throat went dry. Shoto sat up now, arms resting on his knees. I don't know the science behind it. Don't care. But I've seen people disturb those nests and not live long enough to regret it. Izuku flipped to the margin and scrawled one word: nests. Shoto continued, voice low and steady. The roots, those fungal tendrils, they stretch outward. Sometimes from a corpse that died a month ago. Sometimes from a fresh one. They embed into concrete, tile, dirt, doesn't matter. And if they're disturbed, every infected in the next mile comes running. Izuku's stomach turned. Like a hive. Exactly. He let that sit for a moment, then added, some infected echo. Others just lunge. But some. He paused. Izuku looked up. Some what? Shoto's jaw flexed. Some alert. Alert? Izuku repeated. Like, signal? Shoto nodded. They spot you, stop and scream. Loud enough to shake the buildings. I don't think it's language. It's instinct. A warning. Izuku's pencil moved slower now. We haven't seen those yet. You will, Shoto said. They're rare. But worse than the others. Because once they scream, the rest don't stop. Izuku stared at the page. Screamers. Hive growth. Dormant traps. Echoes. Every word made his skin crawl a little more. He swallowed. So we're walking through a graveyard where the dead can scream each other awake? Shoto gave a short, humorless laugh. Welcome to the city. The morning came quietly. It wasn't peaceful, there was no such thing anymore, but it was still. The distant city sounds were muffled behind layers of reinforced concrete and boarded windows. For once, no one woke to screaming. Just the faint crackle of something frying in a pan and the low murmur of voices. Ochako was humming. In the apartment's small kitchen, she stood in mismatched pajamas, flipping what looked like canned potatoes and dried sausage in a pan while Mina sat on the counter beside her, chattering and tossing in sarcastic commentary between sips of rehydrated coffee. See, I told you. You cook with enough garlic powder, and even apocalypse food tastes like love. Or at least less like canned foot, Mina replied with a grin. Ochako laughed softly. Her shoulders looked lighter this morning. Maybe it was the sleep. Maybe it was having new people to talk to. Or maybe for the first time in weeks, she didn't feel like the weight of morale fell entirely on her shoulders. From down the hall, soft footsteps echoed. Shoto emerged first, shirt loose over his frame, hair a messy halo of faded split dye, strands of red and white faded almost entirely into sun-worn blonde. Izuku trailed behind him, rubbing sleep from his eyes, his notebook tucked under one arm. There was a difference in the air. Ochako caught it immediately. Her eyes flicked between them, the slight ease in Shoto's shoulders, the tired but relaxed way Izuku walked beside him instead of behind. Something had shifted overnight. A quiet conversation. A mutual understanding. Maybe even trust? Morning, Izuku offered, voice still hoarse with sleep. Hey, Ochako said, flipping the food gently. We made breakfast. Shoto gave a non-committal nod and crossed to grab a chipped mug. Izuku hovered nearby, half ready to offer help, half afraid to be in the way. The others began filtering in. Kyoka first, already dressed and unimpressed by morning, followed by Aijuru and Denki in mismatched shirts and an argument about whether cold water or military instant coffee qualified as a wake-up weapon. And then Katsuki. He entered without a word, arms crossed, hoodie sleeves shoved up his forearms. His eyes scanned the room and landed on Izuku. Not the usual glance. This one lingered, cool and unreadable. Then they flicked to Shoto. Back to Izuku. Izuku felt his stomach twist. Katsuki said nothing. Just grabbed a protein bar off the counter and moved to the far wall, where he leaned against the corner like a watchdog posted at the edge of the pack. Ochako raised an eyebrow but didn't say anything. Izuku didn't need her to. He already knew what this was. He thought Katsuki was still mad about the spores. About Izuku getting caught up in theories and nearly drawing in a whole swarm the day before. But the longer Katsuki avoided his gaze, The more Izuku realized it wasn't just that. He was mad about Shoto. Izuku sighed and sank into one of the dining chairs. "Thanks for breakfast," he mumbled. Ochako smiled softly. "Thought we could use a good start." Shoto, sitting across from him now, finally spoke. "It's a good idea. The day's not gonna stay quiet." Katsuki scoffed under his breath. Not loud, but sharp enough to cut. Izuku looked up, but Katsuki was already looking away. They gathered around what had once been a dining table, now covered in mismatched mugs and scavenged plates. Ochako had split the food evenly, offering it out with a soft smile and gentle jokes that Mina happily doubled down on. The others filled in around the table with varying degrees of grogginess, but eventually even Kyoka sat. Everyone except Katsuki. He remained against the wall, arms crossed, chewing slowly on his protein bar and ignoring the open seat next to Denki. The breakfast was quiet at first, just forks scraping plates and the occasional murmur. It was Denki who broke the silence. "So, what's the plan?" he asked, glancing between Shoto and the newcomers. "We just sit tight? Hope the horde outside moves on?" Aijiro leaned forward, still chewing. "We gonna split again, or?" That made everyone pause. Izuku looked to Shoto. Then he spoke up, trying to keep his tone level. "Shoto and I talked last night. We think it makes sense for the groups to merge." Katsuki froze. Denki blinked. "Merge?" "Yeah," Izuku said, clearing his throat. "Pool supplies. Share routes. Keep a bigger rotation on watch. Safer, long-term." Shoto nodded. "Better chance of survival if we stop acting like separate islands." Most of the table murmured in agreement. "You decided that on your own?" Katsuki's voice cut through the room like a blade. Izuku turned, already knowing where this was going. "Thought. That's all." "No, you planned," Katsuki snapped, pushing off the wall. "You planned without us. Without me. After one night of playing roommate with a guy who was ready to put a bullet in you if you so much as sneezed weird." Shoto didn't even flinch. "Still am if it comes to it." Katsuki's eyes darkened. Ochako stood slightly, voice calm. "Katsuki." "No," he growled. "We survived a month on our own. The second we find people, suddenly we're changing plans, sharing everything, acting like this is some commune. Because we can't survive on our own forever," Izuku said. "We almost died yesterday. If Shoto hadn't stepped in. If he hadn't, we'd still be together," Katsuki snapped. "Not split up and making plans without each other." The room fell silent. Even Mina didn't joke. Shoto finally spoke again, quieter this time. "The plan's not to stay here forever. It's not built to hold through another full swarm. But your place, the house you were staying in." Izuku looked over, caught off guard. "You want to go back?" "It's removed," Shoto said. "Out of the way. If it kept you safe for a month, we can reinforce it. Less exposure. Fewer entry points. We could dig in there." "We'd have to wait," Kyoka added, crossing her arms. "The horde out there hasn't cleared. It could take days." "Fine," Shoto said. "We wait. Then we move." Ochako looked around the table. "We could make it work." "Really?" But Katsuki's eyes were still locked on Izuku. He didn't say another word. He just turned and left the room, the door clicking shut behind him. 1 week later. The horde didn't vanish overnight. It bled away slowly, one echo at a time, disappearing into the alleys and crumbling buildings like shadows retreating from the sun. They watched them leave. Each night, pairs took turns on the roof, 2-hour shifts, layered in blankets, eyes sharp, weapons within reach. Some echoes wandered aimlessly, brushing their limbs against rusted fences or crawling down streets like broken marionettes. Others just stood still for hours, unmoving, like they'd forgotten what they were chasing. No one dared test the silence. Inside, the apartment slowly came back to life. The mood wasn't cheerful, no one was smiling that wide, but it was lighter. The group started talking more. Mina organized a floor cleanup, which mostly turned into her chasing Denki with a broom. Ochako helped Kyoka start a detailed inventory list of supplies, crossing out anything that smelled like it could kill a goat. Izuku started sleeping better. And he spent more and more of his time with Shoto. It started small quiet conversations after watch duty, Izuku nervously asking questions and Shoto answering with reluctant patience. But then came quiet lunches side by side, swapping observations about the echoes. Long silences that didn't feel awkward. Even laughter real, honest laughter shared during an offhand joke about how many ways a crowbar could double as a kitchen utensil. To everyone else, it looked like progress. But Katsuki kept his distance. He'd been quieter since that morning at the table. Always the last to join meals. Always volunteered for the early watch or the late one, the times when he wouldn't have to see Izuku at all. Sometimes he'd leave the apartment for an hour, maybe two, without telling anyone where he was going. He always came back unharmed. But a little colder. Izuku noticed. He noticed the way Katsuki wouldn't meet his eyes. The way conversations died the second he entered the room. How Katsuki would wait until he'd gone to refill his water, or to step outside. It stung. But he didn't know how to fix it. And every time he almost asked, every time he opened his mouth to close the space between them, Katsuki was already walking away. Izuku 3 tries to find him. The first time, Katsuki ducked into the stairwell before Izuku could even say his name. The second, he disappeared onto the rooftop, claiming watch rotation that wasn't even his. But the third time, just after sunset, while most of the others were gathered for a half-hearted dinner, Izuku caught him alone, standing near the fire escape, arms resting on the railing, hoodie pulled up like armor. Kaken. He didn't turn. Izuku stepped closer, voice tighter this time. I know you've been avoiding me. Katsuki didn't answer. So Izuku pressed. You've barely said 2 words to me all week. You won't sit near me, won't eat near me, you won't even look at me unless it's to glare like I kicked your dog. Katsuki let out a humorless breath. Didn't realize you cared. Izuku winced. Of course I care. Finally, Katsuki turned. His eyes were hard, too hard. Not angry like they used to be. Just tired. And hurt. You made decisions without me. Izuku blinked. What? Shoto. Katsuki shook his head. You decided we'd merge with people we didn't know. You trusted them instantly. You gave up our plan, our safety, because someone lit a fire and opened a door. Izuku's mouth opened, but no words came. You left me out, Katsuki said, voice sharp now. And I'm not just talking about the group plan. I mean everything. You've been glued to Shoto since the moment he didn't kill you. Asking him questions, following him around, acting like he's the one who kept us alive. Izuku's brows furrowed. That's not what I... You didn't even tell me what you two talked about that night, Katsuki snapped. I had to hear our lives were changing at breakfast. Like I'm just some guy who happened to show up when you and Ochako were already surviving. Izuku took a breath. That's not fair. Isn't it? Izuku stepped forward. I didn't plan any of this. I was trying to help. I thought we agreed that surviving wasn't enough anymore, that we needed to understand what we were up against. Katsuki scoffed. You didn't want to understand. You wanted to belong. That stopped Izuku cold. Katsuki's voice dropped, quiet now but not soft. You think I don't see it? The way you look at him? The way you laugh at his sarcasm like it doesn't sound just like mine. Izuku's stomach twisted. Kaken. You trusted him overnight, Katsuki said. It took me months to get you to trust me. And he got you in a night. Izuku's voice shook. Because he saved us. And I didn't? Katsuki barked. All those nights keeping watch while you slept? All the runs I took so you didn't have to? You really think I haven't been protecting you since the day we met? Izuku stared at him, chest tight. That's not what this is about, he said. This isn't about Shoto. It's only about Shoto, Katsuki snapped. Because you gave him everything I earned. Silence. Izuku looked away. Katsuki did too. Neither of them said it, but it hung in the air between them, raw and ugly and real. Finally, Katsuki pushed off the railing. You made your choice. Don't act confused that I'm giving you space. Then he walked past Izuku without another word. Izuku didn't follow. He didn't move. He stood there, rooted to the same spot, staring out at the dark skyline as the last of the sun faded beneath the rooftops. The metal railing was cold under his hands, But he didn't let go. He wasn't sure if he could. Katsuki's words echoed louder than the streets ever could. You gave him everything I earned. It hurt because it wasn't entirely wrong. Izuku exhaled slowly, then wiped at his face when he realized his eyes were burning. He didn't cry, not really. But something in his chest cracked just enough to let the pressure bleed through. He didn't hear the footsteps until Shoto stepped beside him. Hey, Shoto said casually. You're hard to track down when you're not trailing me with a notebook. Izuku didn't answer. Shoto glanced at him sideways, then rested his forearms against the railing. Denki and Idru are going to pass the word to Katsuki tonight. I figured they'd have better luck getting it across without a crowbar being involved. Izuku blinked. Pass what? The plan, Shoto said, watching the skyline. We move at first light. Go back to your safe house. Reinforce it. Split watch in shifts, get out of this hot zone. Figure it's the best call while the horde's cleared off and the weather's holding. He paused, then added, should take 2 hours if we don't hit anything. Izuku didn't reply. After a beat, Shoto finally looked at him again, longer this time. You okay? Izuku swallowed. His throat was tight, and suddenly his backpack felt too heavy, like every conversation he hadn't had was tucked in the seams. He didn't want to answer. Not because he was angry at Shoto, but because admitting anything out loud made it feel permanent. Still, he managed, Katsuki and I talked. Shoto didn't speak, but he didn't have to. The tension in Izuku's voice said enough. Izuku gave a half-hearted laugh, bitter and quiet. It didn't go well. Shoto looked away. Figured something was off when he didn't glare at me. That usually means something worse. Izuku looked down at his hands. He thinks I left him out. That I gave up on us. That I trusted you too easily. Shoto didn't flinch. Did you? He asked. Izuku's answer came slower. I didn't mean to. Silence settled between them again. Not uncomfortable. Just heavy. Shoto finally said, we'll get moving in the morning. If he wants to stay mad, that's his choice. But that house of yours? It's safer. Better than this place. That's what matters. Izuku nodded, though it didn't feel like enough. Shoto didn't press. He just stood beside him, watching the city breathe. The night air was cool, brushing gently against Izuku's skin, but it did little to soothe the heat still burning in his chest. He stood with his hands on the railing, eyes fixed on the horizon, but his thoughts were locked on Katsuki, on every word that hadn't been said, and every one that had cut too deep. Shoto hadn't moved. He wasn't one to fill silences for the sake of comfort. He didn't offer empty reassurances or sympathetic platitudes. He just stayed there, solid and still, like a pillar Izuku could lean on without ever needing to ask. After a while, Shoto spoke again, softly this time. Mina and Ochako are on first watch, he said. We've got a few quiet hours before it's our turn. Izuku didn't respond right away. He didn't want to go back inside. Didn't want to crawl into a sleeping bag next to someone who hadn't raised his voice, hadn't judged him, hadn't looked at him like a betrayal. Because that only made it worse. Shoto shifted slightly, not impatient, just aware. You're not going to fix anything tonight, he said. And beating yourself up about it won't do anyone any good tomorrow. Izuku finally looked at him, eyes tired. He hates me. He's hurt, Shoto replied. There's a difference. Izuku didn't know how to answer that. Shoto nudged his shoulder lightly. Come on. Get some rest. Izuku hesitated. Then nodded. They walked back inside together, the hallway dim and quiet. Behind them, the city still groaned with distant echoes, but none close. Not yet. Izuku climbed back into the shared room, curled into the corner of his sleeping bag. Shoto settled across the room, wordless. The blanket over the window shifted slightly with the breeze. And though Izuku closed his eyes, sleep never came. By the time the first light crept through the blanket over the window, Izuku was already dressed. He'd packed his bag twice, once methodically, once from memory. Every item double-checked. Every strap tightened. He'd portioned out food rations, checked the water jugs, even reinforced the shoulder loops on Ochako's bag with some thread and spare paracord from the supplies. The apartment was still mostly asleep when he moved around the kitchen, organizing, prepping. By the time Mina wandered in rubbing her eyes and mumbling about dreams of waffles and betrayal, Izuku had already loaded the final pack and lined it up neatly by the door. "Dimon," she said, eyeing him through messy braids. "Did you even sleep?" Izuku offered a faint smile. "Didn't need to," he lied. The apartment stirred slowly, the group falling into a familiar rhythm without needing to be told. Breakfast was quick and simple oatmeal, thinned with water and flavored with a questionable packet of instant cocoa Mina found buried in a supply box. It didn't taste great, but it was warm. And right now, warmth was currency. They gathered around the table again, this time with a quieter energy. Focused. Preparing. 2 hours if we're lucky, Shoto said, breaking up a protein bar and sharing the pieces into travel rations. Longer if the streets are blocked or we hit stragglers. "We're going through back roads, right?" Denki asked, shoveling lukewarm oats into his mouth. "I'd rather not run into another flaming welcome party." "Back roads," Shoto confirmed. "Tight alleys, fences, neighborhood cuts. Avoid open intersections." "Sounds scenic," Kyoka muttered. "I'm just saying," Mina said, swirling her spoon, "if we end up hiding in a dumpster again, I'm fighting someone." Ochako grinned. "I'll volunteer as tribute." Izuku stayed mostly quiet, watching the way everyone handled the tension. Even now, there was a strange piece to the noise. Shared survival. It was a little chaotic, a little messy, but it felt like something approaching normal. Katsuki didn't say much either. He stood near the window, chewing mechanically, eyes fixed somewhere far past the cracked glass. Izuku tried not to look too long. They left just after sunrise. The morning air was crisp, fog still clinging to the edges of the street like a reluctant ghost. Everything was damp: the sidewalks, the rusting mailboxes, the brittle grass breaking through cracked pavement. It smelled like metal and earth. Izuku slipped his pack on and tightened the strap. Shoto did the same beside him, checking over each of the others with a quiet glance. Mina linked arms with Ochako as they walked out the door, Kyoka following close behind with her usual half-lidded glare. "Girls in the middle," Mina declared. "We're the morale engine." "Right?" Kyoka muttered, "as long as your engine doesn't scream at bugs again." "I make no promises." Katsuki trailed near the back until Idru clapped a hand on his shoulder like they were lifelong friends. "All right, brooding beast," Idru said. "You're with us." Denki grinned, falling into step on Katsuki's other side. "Safety in numbers." "And sarcasm." Katsuki raised a brow. "You two always talk this much?" "Constantly," they said in perfect unison. Izuku couldn't help but smile a little. Katsuki didn't shove them off, which was progress, in its own quiet way. At the front of the line, Shoto walked beside Izuku in measured, even steps, scanning the road ahead with sharp eyes. His expression was unreadable, as usual, but there was something less rigid about him today. "You really didn't sleep last night," he said, not unkindly. Izuku shrugged. "Had a lot to think about." Shoto didn't press. The city stretched out ahead of them, quiet and watching. They moved forward as one. For the first time since the world fell apart, they weren't running. They had only been walking for about 30 minutes, moving through a narrow residential stretch where the houses leaned too close and the air smelled like mildew when Shoto suddenly raised a hand and brought the group to a halt. "Down," he whispered. Everyone crouched, backs against a crumbling fence line as Shoto crept forward and peered through the slats. Izuku crept up beside him and followed his gaze. There just across the street was a horde. At least 24 echoes clustered together, stumbling and shifting in slow, irregular patterns. Some twitched. Others swayed. They moved like they were waiting for something, though none of them looked toward the street. "They haven't seen us," Denki whispered behind them. "Or heard us," Kyoka added. Shoto studied the echoes carefully. "They're distracted." Izuku frowned. "By what?" Shoto didn't answer. Izuku leaned in a little more, trying to get a clearer view. The echoes were all facing the same general direction, pulled toward something out of sight, something down a sloped road that dropped into a collapsed underpass. The listening," Izuku murmured. "Or following a scent," Ochako offered quietly. "Maybe a body?" But Izuku shook his head. "No. Look, some of them are just standing. Like they're waiting for a signal. They're not mindless. Not all of them. Shoto didn't say anything. Aijiro shifted, his voice low. So what's the call? We wait it out. Shoto shook his head. No time. We detour 2 blocks west. Cut through the laundry complex, loop back near the overpass once we're clear. Katsuki scoffed from the rear. Or we let Deku keep staring and wait to get caught. Izuku didn't rise to it. His eyes were still on the horde. There was a tension there, something subtle but wrong. The way the echoes clustered around the downed hill like they were orbiting something. Not hunting. Not feeding. Gathering. Let's move, Shoto said, already signaling for the group to fall back. Before curiosity kills the lot of us. Izuku hesitated a moment longer. Then followed. But he kept looking over his shoulder because whatever had their attention hadn't made a sound. And that scared him more than screaming ever could. The deeper they pushed into the detour, the more the world felt off. It wasn't the silence. Silence was normal now. It wasn't even the ruins, the cars grown over with vines, the broken glass underfoot. It was the echoes. They passed 3 more small groups in less than 10 minutes, each tucked into strange places. A half-dozen standing silently in a driveway, another cluster inside a shattered garage, their backs turned to the door. 2 loitered in an alleyway, shoulder to shoulder, heads tilted toward the sky like they were watching clouds no one else could see. None of them moved. None of them reacted. Okay, tell me that's not creepy as hell, Mina whispered, ducking beside Ochako and Kyoka behind an old SUV. They're just waiting, Izuku murmured. But for what? Shoto held up a hand again, halting the group just before a narrow intersection. He peered around the corner. There, he said, point. Laundry complex. West side of the block. They moved quickly, keeping low. Izuku's heart pounded with every step. Each group of echoes they passed ratcheting the unease higher. They weren't just scattered. They were positioned. Like something had placed them. They reached the laundry complex without drawing attention. The squat, windowless building sat hunched behind a chain-link fence and a mess of barricades, twisted metal, broken signage, shattered vending machines. Someone had turned this into a safe zone once. It didn't look safe anymore. Looks sealed, Aijiro muttered, stepping forward to get a better look. Shoto crouched and gestured to the right side. There's a gap in the fence. Might be wide enough to crawl through. Crawl, Kyoka said, deadpan. Great. Shoto and Katsuki checked it first, pulling the chain link slightly open. Go, Shoto said, motioning for the others. Ochako slipped through first, her bag catching briefly on a jagged wire before Aijiro helped push it down. Aijiro and Denki followed, grumbling about backpack straps and tight pants. Mina went next, muttering something about tetanus and gym class flashbacks. Then it was Kyoka. She moved confidently, like the fence couldn't touch her, but the edge of the wire snapped back just as she pushed through. She winced, clutching her arm. Sheet. Izuku stepped forward immediately. You okay? I'm fine, she said, but her voice was tighter than usual. Shoto ducked to check the fence as Kyoka moved aside. A thin red line streaked across her forearm, shallow but already beading with blood. Fence caught her, Izuku said, kneeling beside her. Let me see. Kyoka pulled back slightly. It's nothing. It's something, Shoto cut in, voice firm. Izuku, disinfect it. Now. Izuku dug into his pack, pulling out the first aid pouch. The alcohol stung when it hit, and Kyoka hissed through her teeth. I've had worse, she muttered. We can't take chances, Shoto said. Katsuki, who had just slipped through the fence last, glanced at the scratch and then back at the street behind them. His jaw clenched. Anyone else think that's a little convenient? He muttered. Right before we hole up in a building? Kyoka shot him a glare. You think I did it on purpose? Cool it, Ochako said, stepping between them. It's a scratch. We don't know how this thing spreads, Katsuki snapped. Izuku finished wrapping the bandage, carefully tightening it over the wound. There's no bite, no spores, no saliva, just metal and rust. She's okay. For now, Katsuki muttered. Shoto said nothing, but he kept his eyes on Kyoka a moment longer before finally turning toward the building. "Let's get inside," he said, "before something else watches us bleed." The air inside the laundry complex was thick, stagnant with dust and old heat. Light slanted through grime-streaked windows, painting long shadows across the rows of industrial machines. The scent of rust, mold, and something faintly sweet clung to everything, like whatever life used to exist here had rotted quietly in the corners. Clear on the front, Katsuki called lowly, crouched near a barricaded window. His eyes swept the street outside. Nothing moving. Not yet. "Let's keep it that way," Shoto muttered. The group moved through the space in pairs, quiet, focused. Ochako, Mina, and Kyoka checked what was left of a supply closet while Idru and Denki flipped open dryers and poked through overturned baskets. Izuku drifted toward the back wall, drawn by instinct more than purpose. He found a narrow utility window, the glass clouded with age and water damage. Carefully, he wiped a streak clean with the edge of his sleeve. Outside, the alley stretched tight between the laundry building and the remains of an old diner. Cracked pavement, moss clinging to bricks, garbage bags slumped like corpses. And then he saw it. Just beyond the dumpster, partially in shadow, was an echo. It was slumped low against the alley wall, one leg folded awkwardly under its weight. From a distance, it looked dead, its posture loose. Its head drooped forward like it hadn't moved in days. A thin fungal line spread across its exposed forearm, blooming from a jagged wound. Izuku's breath caught. It didn't twitch, didn't lunge, didn't even breathe. But something in his gut twisted. It was the way its face tilted just slightly, turned toward the window. Toward him. Like it knew. Like it was pretending. "Shoto," Izuku said, barely more than a whisper. Shoto appeared beside him, silent as always. He peered through the glass. "Dead?" Izuku asked. Shoto's jaw tightened. "Not sure." Izuku stared a moment longer. "It's waiting." Shoto didn't respond right away. "Stay away from the back wall. We'll take care of it after." The rest of the complex was a ghost of better days, rows of cracked machines, warped flooring, old vending units gutted long ago. They worked quickly, moving in pairs to sweep the remaining rooms. They didn't mention the echo again, not out loud, but the tension had shifted. Every step through the laundry complex now felt heavier. Katsuki stayed near the front window, keeping his eyes on the street. Shoto shifted toward the back. Izuku hovered nearby, notebook forgotten in his bag, something gnawing at the edges of his thoughts. The building was cleared quickly, rows of machines long. Dead, shelves looted, the air warm and stale like it had been sealed for years. "We're done here," Kyoka said eventually, tossing a broken broom aside. "Let's go." They gathered at the rear exit, a narrow metal door bolted shut from the inside. Faint morning light leaked through the seams. Izuku shifted his weight, suddenly aware of how quiet it had gotten again. Shoto moved toward the door, pausing long enough to draw his knife and nod to Katsuki. "On 3. Katsuki unlatched the bolt. Shoto gripped the handle. 1. Izuku's hand closed around the strap of his pack. 2. The others formed a loose semicircle, weapons ready. 3. The door opened with a metallic creak. And then the world held its breath. Outside, the alley was bathed in soft gray light. Mist clung to the ground in thin tendrils, curling between patches of weeds and splintered concrete. The air was thick, motionless. Izuku's eyes moved first. Then his stomach dropped. For echoes. They didn't move. Didn't even flinch. One stood directly in the center of the alley, about 10 feet from the door, still as a statue. Arms limp. Eyes dull and half-lidded. It stared straight ahead, unmoving. Another leaned partially behind a rusted dumpster. Izuku recognized it immediately. It was the same one that had been slumped against the wall when he peeked through the back window. It hadn't moved. Not then. Not now. But it was closer. The third was harder to spot, just a faint outline above, crouched low on the roof opposite them. Izuku almost missed it, the way it blended into the rot-stained shingles. Its limbs bent awkwardly like a coiled animal. Its head twitched slightly, like it was listening. The fourth stood farther down the alley, nearly obscured in shadow. Still, facing away. None of them lunged. None groaned. No shrieking. No alert. They were waiting. Katsuki tensed beside him. What the hell is this? Then it happened. The echo on the roof moved. Slowly, like a breath drawn in reverse. Its limbs shifted, its neck craned downward until its face aligned with theirs. Its mouth opened. What came out wasn't a scream. It was a soundless wail, a whisper stretched too far, like a scream that had lost its voice and still didn't know how to stop. That was the signal. The echo in front lunged first silent until the last second, when its foot hit broken glass and the sharp crack echoed across the alley. Then came the others. The one from behind the dumpster sprang forward, dragging its foot like it had been playing injured. The one in shadow spun around, sprinting with fluid, terrifying grace. And the one from the roof dropped, landing in the dirt with a sickening crunch of bone and rot. Back inside. Shoto yelled, slamming the door, but one of them jammed its hand in the frame before it could shut. The whole group burst backward into the building as the echo forced its way in. Kyoka didn't hesitate. She met it head-on. Her blade sank into the echo's neck once, twice, until it fell in a pile at her feet. Blood splashed up her sleeve, staining her bandage deep red. She swore, barely registering it, yanking her knife free and turning just in time to meet the second one. The room exploded with motion. Ochako swung her lacrosse stick wide, knocking a staggering echo into a dryer door with a loud clang. Denki and Aijuru charged another, working in brutal rhythm to pin and crush it. Mina shoved the fourth back with a metal stool, screaming something no one could hear. Izuka didn't see who landed the killing blow. Just that it ended. Just that they were alive, panting. But shaking. Shoto checked the alley. Empty again. Go, he said, voice low. Now. They didn't argue. They ran. No one said a word, just the pounding of boots on cracked pavement, the rush of breath in their lungs, the metallic slap of gear against backpacks. Every shadow felt like it might move. Every alley mouth looked like a trap. The city stretched before them like a dying animal, still, but twitching. Izuku's legs burned, but he kept moving. One hand on his pack, the other gripping the crowbar tight. His mind buzzed, still stuck on what he saw, the echo on the roof, crouched like it was hunting. The way it had waited. They had coordinated. But they were supposed to be mindless. Driven by sound. By instinct. But those echoes had behaved like something else entirely. Shepherds. He didn't say the word aloud. Not yet. Shoto led the way through side streets and broken lots, eyes scanning high and low. He didn't speak, but he glanced back, often keeping pace with Izuku, checking the group spread. Always watching. Kyoka stayed near the rear, her jaw tight, one hand wrapped around her upper arm. Her blade was still red with blood, dripping slightly as she ran. No one noticed the way her shoulders hunched tighter. No one saw the way her pupils dilated more than they should have. Not yet. They cut through a crumbling strip mall, past an overturned DLVY truck and a shattered gas station. The streets had grown quieter since the horde left the city center, but quiet didn't mean safe. It meant listening. By the time the house came into view, half covered in ivy, its back gate half hanging from a rotted post, everyone was gasping. Katsuki broke from the back to throw open the gate. Go! One by one they rushed inside, through the familiar kitchen, the dusty hall. Izuku was the last through the door, locking it behind them as Shoto checked the perimeter through the windows. They stood there in the foyer, panting, pale, sweat dripping down their necks. The house creaked around them, familiar, quiet, and somehow smaller than it had felt before. Ochako leaned against the wall, trying to slow her breathing. We made it. Kyoka didn't say anything. Izuku's eyes flicked to her, noticing her posture, the way her free hand trembled just slightly at her side. But before he could speak, she brushed past him. I'm fine, she muttered. Just need to sit. The others fanned out into the house, unloading gear, dropping into old chairs, stripping off backpacks like their bones hurt. Izuku lingered in the hall. He looked toward the window, toward the alley outside, and thought about the way the echo on the roof had made no sound until it wanted to. The house breathed around them, creaking in the beams, humming with faint, stubborn power still wired through its bones. Ochako opened the blinds just enough to let in filtered daylight. The dust in the air moved like falling ash. Izuku sat at the old dining table, notebook open but untouched. He wasn't writing. His eyes were on Kyoka. She was across the room on the torn couch, slumped slightly to one side, her arm cradled in her lap. She hadn't taken the bandage off yet. Her jaw was tight, clenched like she was grinding down pain. Everyone else had gone about their tasks, Iger checking the water stash, Mina trying to rehang a curtain, Shoto securing the front window. But Izuku kept watching her. She hadn't made a sound since they entered the house. Not a complaint, not a sarcastic jab, not even a sigh. That wasn't like her. He rose quietly and walked to the kitchen. On the way back, he passed by the couch and sat in a chair beside it, pretending to be checking his pack just nearby. Kyoka's eyes were closed but not in rest. Her brow was furrowed. Her breathing shallow. "Kyoka?" Izuku said softly. She cracked one eye open. "Fine," she rasped. "Didn't ask," he replied gently. "I was just looking at your arm." She stiffened. Izuku shifted closer and nodded to the stained bandage. "That's not the same wrap you had before the fight." Kyoka didn't answer. "Did it rip?" he asked. "Or did it get hit?" She turned her head away. "Kyoka," Izuku said, firmer this time. "Please let me look." For a moment, she didn't move. Then reluctantly she held out her arm. The bandage was soaked through. A thick, sickly maroon stain had spread across most of the wrap, the color darker than blood alone. When Izuku began to unwrap it, a faint smell lifted sweet, almost like rot left too long in the sun. His hand slowed. Underneath the bandage, her arm was red. Inflamed. But worse than that, it was veined. Thin black-purple lines stretched from the scratch toward her elbow like roots pushing beneath her skin. They pulsed. Izuku froze. The world tunneled. "Kyoka," he whispered, his throat suddenly dry. "When did the blood get on this?" "I don't know," she muttered. "During the fight. I didn't even feel it." Izuku's hands hovered over her skin. "Did it get in the cut?" She didn't answer. Izuku stood abruptly, his chair scraping back. Shoto noticed the sound and was across the room in seconds. "What is it?" Izuku looked up at him, face pale. "She's infected." Everyone turned. Kyoka finally pulled her arm back, breathing faster now. No, it was just contact, it wasn't a bite." Izuku was already pacing. "It's spreading fast," he muttered. "Too fast. The lines, there's something in the blood. Not spores. Not surface contamination. It's internal." Ochako covered her mouth. Katsuki stepped forward, jaw tight. "Then we kill her." The words dropped like a bomb. Kyoka's head snapped up. "What?" "We don't know how fast it spreads," Katsuki said, voice hard. "We've seen what happens when someone turns inside a shelter. It's her arm now. What is it in an hour? Her spine? Her head? We don't wait around for another surprise." "You can't be serious," Ochako said. Katsuki didn't look at her. His eyes stayed on Izuku. "You know I'm right," he said. Izuku's hands curled into fists. "No. We're not killing her. She's already infected." "That doesn't mean she's gone," Izuku snapped. "Not yet. If we move fast enough, we can amputate. Stop the spread. Or delay it," Katsuki muttered. "Buy ourselves a scream and a bloodbath." "Enough." Shoto barked, stepping between them. His eyes scanned the room. "We try the amputation. We don't kill anyone unless we have no other choice." Kyoka let out a quiet breath, her voice smaller than any of them had ever heard it. "I don't want to turn." Izuku looked at her, then to Shoto. "We can still save her." Shoto gave a sharp nod. Katsuki didn't say anything else. But the look on his face said it all. He didn't believe it. Izuku had never cut someone open before. He knew the theory. He'd practiced simulated incisions in labs, read dozens of surgical case studies. He'd studied wound closure, circulatory trauma, nerve response. He knew exactly where to cut, what to avoid, how to tie off an artery. But knowing wasn't the same as doing. The others cleared the table, moving quickly. Ochako laid down a folded blanket for Kyoka to bite if needed, while Shoto sterilized a kitchen knife over the stove burner, his jaw clenched tight. Mina fetched gauze and alcohol from the first aid bin. No one asked who would do it. They all looked at Izuku. Kyoka sat stiffly in the chair beside the table, her face pale and gleaming with sweat. The dark lines in her arm had reached her elbow. Izuku took a breath. We have to move now. Any longer, it could reach her shoulder or spine. If it hits her bloodstream fully, he didn't finish. Kyoka met his eyes. Just make it quick. Izuku gave a shaky nod. He didn't see Katsuki. Somewhere in the chaos, he'd slipped out of the room. Izuku hadn't heard a door open. Hadn't heard footsteps. Just absence. He pushed the thought down. Focus. He laid out the supplies with methodical hands. The sterilized knife, a belt for a tourniquet, clean gauze, surgical tape, disinfectant. Every movement felt surreal, like his body knew what to do but the rest of him hadn't caught up yet. He crouched beside Kyoka. I need you to hold as still as you can. Once I start, I have to be fast. Kyoka didn't respond. Her jaw was set like stone. Ochako stood behind her, one hand resting gently on her uninjured shoulder. Mina hovered nearby, visibly shaken but ready to help. Izuku tightened the belt just above Kyoka's elbow. He waited until her hand began to pale, blood slowing. I'm going just above the infected site. Kyoka nodded once. Izuku raised the knife. His hands didn't shake. Not until the blade touched skin. The first cut was clean. Kyoka bit into the blanket and let out a low, strangled grunt. Izuku moved fast, his grip steady, working through tissue, angling the knife between muscle groups like he'd studied. Blood welled, dark and sluggish. He was vaguely aware of Ochako's soft murmurs. Mina handing him gauze before he even asked. Shoto standing silent at the doorway, unreadable. But Katsuki was still gone. He didn't know why that unsettled him more than the rest of it. Izuku found the bone. He reached for the hammer, a repurposed tool from their pack, and broke the ulna in one clean strike. The radius snapped a second later. Kyoka screamed into the blanket, body trembling. Izuku finished the cut. Slid the knife clean through. The arm dropped into a steel basin with a wet thud. He worked quickly to seal the wound, gauze already soaked red. Tape, pressure, more gauze. He tied a compression knot with shaking fingers and stepped back only when the bleeding slowed. Kyoka had passed out. Tako caught her. Just as she slumped, gently lowering her onto the blanket. Izuku sat down hard on the floor. His hands were coated in blood. His stomach flipped once then again, but he kept breathing. He had done it. But now came the harder part. Waiting to see if it was too late. And wondering where the hell Katsuki had gone. Kyoka's blood had dried into the creases of his knuckles, stuck beneath his nails. He kept staring at them, like if he looked long enough, he could pretend they belonged to someone else. Someone who hadn't just cut off a girl's arm and hoped that it would be enough. He couldn't stop thinking about the moment the bone cracked under the hammer. The sound of Kyoka's breathing breaking behind the rag in her mouth. The weight of the arm in his hand. He closed his eyes, just for a second, but her face was still there behind them. Then the door creaked open. Boots on the hardwood. Izuku's eyes snapped up. Katsuki stepped inside, the hallway shadows peeling away from him like smoke. His hoodie was dusted with debris. His sleeves were rolled to the elbows, and there was something faintly metallic in the scent trailing behind him like rust or fresh nails. He looked like he'd just come from a crawlspace. Izuku pushed himself to his feet. You weren't here, he said quietly. Not accusing. Just fact. Katsuki's eyes flicked to the table. Kyoka unconscious, her face too pale, her bandaged stump resting on a folded towel. Then to Ochako, who knelt beside her, murmuring softly with damp eyes. To Shoto, who stood at the kitchen threshold, watching Katsuki like he was something volatile. I set up the old supply room, Katsuki said. Cleared it out. Sealed the door. Reinforced the vents. Only one way in or out. Izuku blinked, trying to keep up. What for? Katsuki's voice was flat. Quarantine. A beat passed. Then Shoto pushed off the wall. You did this behind our backs? I did it because someone needed to, Katsuki snapped. None of you were thinking about what happens if she turns. She's not going to, Ochako said softly, but there wasn't much conviction behind it. Shoto took a slow step forward. You don't get to make that decision on your own. No. Katsuki's tone sharpened. Because I remember you willing to kill Izuku over a spore cloud. But now that it's your people, you suddenly find mercy? Izuku flinched at the mention of it. That first night. The fear in Shoto's eyes. Shoto's jaw clenched. That was a tactical risk. This is the same thing, Katsuki barked. You were ready to kill him just in case. But now it's inconvenient, so you draw a line. I'm not killing someone who just had her arm cut off by the people trying to save her. And if she turns while everyone's asleep? Katsuki's eyes narrowed. You think she won't kill someone before you even blink? Stop it, Izuku said, louder now. Everyone turned. Izuku stood stiffly in the center of the room, the front of his hoodie stained red, his hands trembling slightly. He didn't look at either of them. Just at Kyoka. I'll stay with her. No, Katsuki said immediately. Absolutely not. Izuku turned to face him. I have to. I'm the one who told her we could fix it. I'm the one who did this. If it works, if she makes it, we'll know what helps. If it doesn't, he hesitated. If it doesn't, I'll deal with it. Deku, this isn't your burden to... Yes, it is, Izuku snapped. You want to talk about responsibility? This is mine. None of you can monitor her symptoms. You wouldn't know what to look for. You'd just be waiting for her to change. Katsuki opened his mouth to argue again, but this time, Shoto stepped forward. Is the room secure? Shoto asked him. Katsuki gave a curt nod. Enough to hold one person. Izuku nodded back. Ochako rose from Kyoka's side. I'll help carry her. I'll get the door, Mina added softly. Katsuki didn't move. He watched as Izuku leaned down and gently lifted Kyoka's unconscious body into his arms, bracing her weight against his chest. Her breathing was shallow. Her skin already cooling. Izuku tried not to look at the bandage. As he passed Katsuki, their eyes met. There was something behind Katsuki's glare, something sharper than anger. Guilt. Fear. Frustration Izuku couldn't name. But neither of them said a word. Izuku carried Kyoka down the hall in silence, the others following behind. The quarantine room used to be a pantry wide enough to pace, low enough to feel like a box. Katsuki had cleaned it out completely, even padded the baseboards with foam and lined the air vent with wire mesh. There was a cot, a chair, a jug of water, a first aid box, and a heavy chain lock on the outside. Izuku lowered Kyoka onto the cot. Ochako adjusted her pillow. Shoto did a final check of the door bolts. When everyone left, Izuku stayed behind. The lock clicked shut. The room was dim. So, Izuku sat beside her and took out his notebook with blood-stained hands. Day 1 he wrote. Post-amputation. Pulse, shallow. Pupils, reactive. No muscle twitching yet. Infection possibly slowed. Unknown. Watching for change. He paused. Then, in smaller handwriting, I hope I didn't just kill her slower. The room had grown colder. Izuku hadn't noticed it at first, too focused on the rhythm of Kyoka's breathing, too absorbed in scribbling notes he didn't know how to make sense of. His pen hovered now above half-finished words, the ink pooling in a single black dot. Pupil dilation, muscle spasms, verbal repetition. None of it told him what he needed to know. Because none of it was working. Across the room, Kyoka stirred again. Her legs kicked once beneath the blanket. Her left hand twitched sharply, curling into a claw, then relaxing just as quickly. Izuku's heart picked up. It had been hours. The bandaged stump hadn't darkened. The lines beneath her skin had faded. The infection should have stopped. But it hadn't. Kyoka, he whispered. She didn't respond. Her head lolled slightly to the side, her lips parted as she murmured to herself. Izuku crawled closer, staying low and quiet. I don't want to turn, she whispered. I don't want to turn, please don't want to turn. Izuku's stomach dropped. The tone was off. Wrong. Each repetition was identical, perfectly timed. The same inflection, same pace. It wasn't speech anymore. It was playback. An echo. No. Izuku slowly backed away, breathing shallow, adrenaline spiking in his veins. He looked down at his notes again, heart pounding. No signs of spreading through blood, black lines faded. Then it hit him. The nerves. It wasn't in the blood at all. It was in the nervous system's spinal fluid, maybe. That's how it moved. How it spread. Not by veins but by synapses. Like a parasite riding electricity. The amputation hadn't saved her. It had just delayed the signal. Izuku shot to his feet, stumbling toward the door. He knocked hard twice. Shoto? Kaken? I need someone in here now. He knocked again. Louder. Then he turned around. And everything stopped. Kyoko was sitting up. She hadn't moved slowly or groggily like before. She had snapped upright, her head tilted at an unnatural angle. Her eyes were wide, pupils blown wide and black, and her mouth hung open slightly, like she'd forgotten how to use it. Kyoka, Izuku said, voice cracking. She twitched. Then her jaw moved. I don't want to turn, the same words. Fin. Still hers but hollow. Like they were stuck on repeat. Like the virus was wearing her voice like a mask. Her head jerked. She locked eyes with him. And lunged. Izuku barely had time to react. He threw his arms up, tripping backward over the cot leg, crashing to the floor. Kyoka landed on top of him, her weight full and solid, her hand clawing at his shirt, her mouth aiming for his neck. No, Kyoka, please, he shouted, wrestling with her. She's turned. Someone. Her mouth snapped shut just shy of his throat, her teeth clicking together with a sharp crack. Izuku kicked, twisting sideways, trying to shove her off. Then she struck again. This time, her teeth sank into his side. The pain was immediate and blinding, white-hot and deep. Izuku screamed. Get her off me. The door slammed open. Gunfire exploded in the room, one sharp, concussive shot. Kyoka's body jolted. Blood splattered across Izuku's cheek. She went limp, her full weight collapsing on top of him with a wet, final grunt. Everything went still. Izuku lay there frozen beneath her, gasping, ears ringing. The stench of blood filled the room, thick and hot and real. Katsuki was at the door, gun still raised, arm shaking. Deku. Izuku didn't answer. He pushed at Kyoka's body until he could roll free, dragging himself toward the wall. He sat hard, pressing his hand to his side. It came away red. Katsuki's eyes dropped. Then froze. The bite was visible, ragged and deep, just under Izuku's ribs. The shirt was torn. The flesh beneath was already purpling at the edges. Izuku looked at it. Then up at Katsuki. Neither of them spoke. Because they both knew what it meant. And it was already too late.